Meeting to order. Would everyone please stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, council, we'll have roll call. Ms. Holly?
All councilors present with Councilor Griego previously requesting to be excused.
Thank you so very much. And Councilor Griego called me a little bit earlier today. He has the flu, and he won't be able to make it to the meeting tonight. But he wanted the audience to know that he has had an opportunity to review a lot of the comments that they've made. Okay? All right. The next item on the agenda is the agenda approval.
Mayor, staff would like to recommend that we modify the agenda with 2 items. The first one is to move letter A under number 4, City Manager Legal. That is the lease with Western Rivers. We do have Dieter Ederman here with us tonight, and so if we could move that to be the first item under regular business, that will allow us to handle that in a timely fashion and allow Dieter to maybe leave. The other recommendation staff would make is to move letter H, which is, I have a feeling, a reason a lot of people are here tonight, which is the potential sale of approximately 35 acres. I would address that after letter A, and then that way if those individuals want to leave after we progress through the rest of the agenda, they can do so.
Are you talking about moving it after 4A?
Correct. So we would do consent calendar A, and then when we hit regular business, we would first do 4A because we don't anticipate that to take very long, and then we would recommend doing 4H.
Okay.
Mayor, I move that we approve the agenda, we amend the agenda, and we move item 4A to regular business, followed by 4H, after 4A, under regular business, and excuse Charlie Griego from the meeting.
Okay, we have a motion. Oh.
Are you ready?
Yep.
I'll second.
Okay. Start voting. Okay, Ms. Holly?
The motion carried unanimously.
Okay, thank you so very much. Okay, the next item we have is citizen comments. Okay, I have some comment cards up here today. Looks like 2, 4, 6, at least 8 of them. So I know there are a lot of people here today who are probably here who want to make a comment about the proposed RV resort. What we're going to do is I'll have these 12 people come up here and state your name, and if you could start your comments and keep your comments under 3 minutes, we would greatly appreciate it. We do have a clock. When it reaches 3 minutes, I will politely ask you if you would end and let the next person come up there out of a respect for time. Another thing we're going to do tonight as well, with having so many different cards and so many people who probably have comments that they would like to make, we're probably going to find out that many of you may have similar comments. So what I'll do is I'll just ask by a show of hands how many of you are in agreement with it. And then if you don't want to come up and say something, you don't have to if someone has already said what you've said. Is that okay with everyone? All right, good deal. The first person we have is Ms. Connie Martin.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to talk. I just want to comment, primarily ask that you, as our stewards of our community, that you be very thoughtful and cautious about how this RV resort conversation goes. I have tremendous concerns and a lot of questions about the business model, about what happens if an upscale RV resort is not what this business turns out to be, the impact that it has on our greater community, the impact that it has on me as a homeowner, and just the impact that it has for so many people who get out and enjoy the open space and the ranch area. And while I can appreciate the concerns that we have with hotels, the concerns that we have with missed opportunities with travelers, I am very supportive of those developments, but want to make sure that we've done that in a very thoughtful manner. When we make the kind of changes that are being proposed now out at the ranch property, there isn't a way to go back gracefully. And if it doesn't work or it doesn't turn out the way that we desire, we could end up with blight and an eyesore and something that becomes a community liability for a long period of time. I've been spending a lot of time researching coast to coast, researching the RV park model, researching what's happened to RV parks that have gone bankrupt, and I have found a lot of questions. And in fairness, I haven't had a chance to have my questions answered because we as homeowners don't meet with the developers until sometime next week. I think unfortunately it's playing out in our community as if this is a done deal, as if various groups and organizations are out in support of it, and that in some way the opposing voice or the anti-voice is one that is being attempted to be quieted. I call on you as our community leaders to be open-minded, listen to all the sides, consider all the implications, and that I think that that's your responsibility to us as the citizens of Alamosa to be sure you have all the information before you make a decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, if you can raise your hand if you're in agreement with her, just so council can get an idea. Okay. All right, good. Thank you. Next, we have Ms. Delzia Worley.
Good evening. My name is Delzia Worley. Thank you, Mayor Coleman and City Council, for listening to us tonight. I guess I would like to echo some of the things that Connie had just mentioned, that we need to thoughtfully think about how we approach this. I would also like us to strongly take into consideration the opportunity that we have to stimulate the area. There's a tremendous opportunity for economic development, and that will stimulate other facets of our local community. I was born and raised here in the Valley. I'm an Adams State graduate, and even though I'm not as skinny as some of the awesome runners that I see go past my house, I use the trails a lot, and so I do appreciate some of the concerns, but very much in support of economic development and this project done right. Thank you.
Thank you. Once again, by a show of hands, how many of you are in agreement with her? Okay, good. Thank you. The next person, Matt, the last time I messed up your last name, so I'll let you come up here, Matt, and say a few words and pronounce your last name, okay? I apologize about that last time.
It has an accent mark over here.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, my name is Matthew Clay, and I spoke to you a couple of weeks ago, and I did go to, the developers had a meeting at La Manzanilla Farm, and I attended that meeting, and the issue I brought up with you a couple weeks ago was the issue of what the vehicles, not the RVs that drive into the park, but once the RVs are in the park, where those vehicles go to help stimulate the economy. Because if they don't leave the park, then the economy doesn't get stimulated. Unfortunately, the developers don't seem to understand that the difference between RV traffic and the other traffic, or they don't seem to take the other traffic seriously. I kept trying to push and never got a good response. Evidently, there has been no traffic study done about the potential traffic impacts of the RV park. Is this something that the city is going to require? That's a question. I did some other research. 2015 statistics from the Recreational Vehicle Industry Association, 87% of all the vehicles, recreational vehicles sold that year were classified in the category of towables. What that means, obviously, is that it's not the RVs just going there and parking, but they unhitch and then they have a vehicle. So 87% of the, at capacity, would represent about 285 more vehicles coming into downtown if we want the economic impact. And that's going to be the State Avenue Bridge. That's really the only avenue from that location here. And I just want some assurance that those issues, because there is no place for them to go once they get over the bridge.
Thank you. By show of hands, who are in agreement with him? Okay. Thank you. Julie Mordecai.
Hi, I'm Julie Mordecai. I live at 12 Cottonwood Place. I really didn't come to talk about the RV resort tonight. I don't want to be a broken record. You've heard what I think about planning and having a plan for the ranch, and we're going to do that in the future. And about saving trees and doing some trading, and I've talked with the developers about that so we can really protect some of the most fragile areas in the community. So hopefully we'll see some changes around that. But what I am talking to you about is the narrow gauge newsstand, which is going out of business this weekend. And that's a company that brings in $250,000 a year in business, which you're going to lose sales tax from. And so I wanted to let you know that there are some of us that are thinking about turning it into a cooperative bookstore, which would have a really strong, would keep our anchor in downtown Alamosa. We've talked to the owner, he's very interested, and it would maintain some tax revenue for our city, along with some jobs, but then we'd also have some people that would be volunteering time to be at the bookstore. Changing it up a lot, adding a lot more to it. We'll share the business plan with you later, but if anyone's interested, I figure I might say this here and it might get in the newspaper. Please get in touch with me because we're going to be planning on Tuesday night on how to make this work. We're looking at the cooperative model, and we do care a lot about Alamosa, and so we might end up putting something upstairs. We're looking at, those where people can have businesses where they can go in and just workstations. If we do the upstairs, some really neat ideas for downtown Alamosa. And so my mantra is planning for downtown, keeping the things we have, and I'll just be here to keep saying that, but not too much. All right, see you guys.
Thank you very much. The next person is Peter Wise.
Good evening, Mayor Coleman and council members. Thank you for this opportunity to provide public input. My name is Peter Wise, and I live at 83 State Avenue. I'm here tonight, I guess, again, to reiterate my belief that the cottonwood stands and the private parcels surrounding the golf course are of real value, and I feel that they should be kept and preserved, and would propose a trade if the city would consider it, and consider it thoughtfully, that they would grant part of the city ranch as a trade for the RV park developers. The second thing, I would like to make an announcement that Dave Montgomery will be leading a walk at 10 a.m. on Saturday morning. This will be an informational walk, strictly educational for those who are interested in learning more about the RV park and what parcels of land and what values they have And John Stump will also be doing birding on that. So it should be a fun time, stop-and-go type walk. We will meet at the disc golf course entrance, and yeah, there's a portable facility there, but no water on site. So also prepare for the wind. It might get a little windy. So thank you very much, all.
Thank you, thank you. Once again, by a show of hands, if we could briefly, okay. Thank you. Next, Don Spencer and Eric Olson.
Good evening, Mayor Coleman and council members. Thank you for having us tonight. I'm Don Spencer. I live at 45 Cascade Avenue with my wife, Andrea. And this is Eric Olson. Pleasure. A partner. We are 2 of the 4 partners of the proposed Rio Bravo RV Resort. We're not here to make a presentation tonight. We've been doing quite a few of them recently. But we are here to answer questions for council later when the discussion goes on. So we want to let you know we're here and ready and willing to answer questions. That's all we have.
Well, will they be able to take questions during that portion of the meeting?
Yes, so we would recommend to council not to engage right now since we're in the public comment section, but when you pull that up from the agenda perspective, you can ask them to come back up.
Thank you. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Carmel Garcia.
Hi, Mayor Coleman and council members. I live at 2211 Bee Hill Way, and I've lived here for about 3 years. And I originally come from Southern California, and coming here, there's such a potential for economic development in this area. But to my recent concern, I attended actually the developers meeting for the RV proposal, and to me, there are far more questions than answers, and the plan seemed, I consider you guys to look at it very carefully and consider what is not being looked at, and as far as like environmental impacts, and as Dr. Clay pointed out, like traffic impacts, and how maybe possibly we can do some sort of trade. And yeah, I do see that this area, it's used by a lot of outdoor individuals, or just the community in general. And as a runner, I take that trail all the time, and yeah, I guess one of the concerns that was brought up, one of the developers pointed out that part of the trail was owned by Leroy Martinez, and that we were on his private property, and that the city of Alamosa developed that trail for all the individuals. So it's kind of, they're just things that as a community member I didn't know about, and that were brought up by the developers. And also just looking at the future development of that area and the residents in that area, and taking all those sides. The Rio Grande, it's a 2,000-mile river, and I think we should look at what impacts we make there near the river corridor, and it's because it's going to affect all the way down, and whatever changes that we make now, that's definitely going to be an impact, not in that just area, but the long term of things. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Once again, if we can just get a show of hands of who all are probably in similar agreement. Okay, thank you. Faustine Martinez.
Good evening. My name is Faustine Martinez, and I come with a few concerns. I have been reading about this RV park, but I have not once seen where the water is going to be addressed. I have not heard where the water is coming from. It'll take a pretty good-sized well. There has to be augmentation if that's the plan. I sat on the ranch board for many years, and our recommendation to City Council was that this ranch stay as a working ranch, that it not deviate from a working ranch. As you all know, the city purchased this ranch for its water rights, was one of the main things. We needed that water to augment the city wells, and so we need to address those issues very carefully. If we give water away from this ranch, then we're going to have problems, because right now it's pretty much natural grass there, and without water, that won't exist anymore. One of the other concerns is we're right across the river. I live on Riverwood Drive, and I don't know that I want to see RVs across the river. Some of those generators run all night, as you all know. RVs are noisy. There's going to be a lot of traffic. There's issues that we really need to consider. I'm not opposed to an RV park, but our San Luis Valley is 150 miles by 90 miles, and surely we've got property somewhere where, you know, an RV park could easily be placed and benefit everybody. It's not that I'm totally against it, but the area I totally disagree with. I'm an adjacent ranch owner next to the city ranch, and we run cattle there, and I think that'll affect the livelihood of the cattle. And there's many other concerns, but my time is up, and I ask you just to consider everything, and we'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. One more time, how many of you have similar concerns? Okay, good. All right, Dieter Erdman.
Thank you, Mayor Coleman and councilors. My name is Dieter Erdman. I'm with Western Rivers Conservancy. We've got an agenda item here regarding a recreational lease on property owned by Western Rivers Conservancy to the city. And I just wanted to let you all know that I'm here and happy to answer any questions that you have about the lease in particular, or the property, or the context. So, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that's all of the comments that we have tonight, and we're going to have follow-up. Eric, do you have any, Heather, any follow-up? Okay. All right, well, once again, we want to thank you for your comments, and I can assure you that every council member up here takes into consideration your thoughts, your comments, your emails, and your phone calls, and we really appreciate you coming out here and saying what's on your mind tonight. Okay, we're going to go to the next item, ceremonial items. Recognition of Daniel Montano as wastewater treatment plant operator of the year. Let's give him a round of applause. Okay. Who's coming up to present?
Mark Farron, who's coming up?
Okay. I got it.
Okay, we like to congratulate Daniel in the Colorado What is the name of the group? Farron, come on up here.
Oh, that's fine.
It's the Colorado Rural Water Association.
Yeah. And Daniel was at that meeting this week, and he was recognized, and my understanding is that it was a large pool of operators that were nominated this year. So we especially are proud of Daniel and his recognition as Wastewater Treatment Operator of the Year. Come on up, Daniel.
We have a plaque, and we're going to come down there with you to present this to him, but can Daniel come to the mic and just say a few words, if you don't mind?
And Farron, if you have anything embarrassing to say as well, that would be great.
Well, I'd just like to say it's a big honor. You know, it's a big accomplishment for me to be here and receive that award. I thank Farron and Randy and Roy for nominating me. I mean, they say that's all they did, but you know, that's just the push I needed, and the folks at Colorado Rural Water had the last say, so I appreciate that as well. And I'm just going to continue to work my best and push hard and be the operator I want to be, and just continue to succeed. So, thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, for myself, I've had the pleasure of being his supervisor for pretty much 10 years or better. His dedication to his work and his efforts to improve himself are greatly appreciated. It's one thing to get acknowledgement from fellow staff members and employees and get an attaboy and a pat on the back, but when people that work in the field that you do from other entities and other communities recognize him, it speaks volumes as far as for his character and also the type of people that we have on staff. And really, Daniel, he says we nominated. We did. We nominated him, but his actions got him that award. So to me, it's a major accomplishment. It's great.
Okay, Daniel, we want to thank you so very much. We'll come down there in a minute, but once again, I too want to thank you for 10 years of service and also becoming the Wastewater Operator of the Year. That's amazing. Another thing you all probably don't know about Daniel is he's a real good disc golfer too. So, all right, let's go down.
Stand out in the middle. Daniel, get out.
Just the proud parents of Daniel. You should be proud.
Very proud. Right. The next item on the agenda is the consent calendar A. Well, can I receive a motion to approve consent calendar A?
Mayor, I move that we approve consent calendar A.
I second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Okay, any further discussions? Okay. Start voting. Has everyone voted? All right, thank you. Ms. Holly? Okay, we're going to have to do this again.
Busy watching two things.
Okay. Start voting.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, Ms. Holly?
The motion carried unanimously.
Thank you so very much. Okay, the next item is regular business, and we have business brought forth by city staff. Once again, council, sometimes we have a lot of different things on this agenda, and for the sake of time, I had conversation with the city manager earlier this week. We don't have to read all the way through each one of these, so I won't read through all of these unless unless there's a call for a public hearing, okay? All right, the first item is item number A, the first reading of ordinance number 4A. We move them around, okay?
Yes. Sorry, Mayor.
Go
We
ahead.
created some confusion tonight. The item before you is the motion authorizing the city manager to sign a lease with Western Rivers. The city attorney is putting up a map. The area that is in yellow is the area of land that has been purchased by Western Rivers, and Dieter is here tonight in case you have questions related to that lease. Historically, our former Public Works Director, Pat, had one of his out-of-the-box ideas in regards to talking to Regis Sheffis on how can we look at extending the trail system that the city has along the river. And Regis owns a significant amount of property out there, and Pat was trying to get creative in how some of that could be the public dedication for future annexations and those types of things. As those discussions progressed, the Western Rivers was brought in as a potential partner to help maybe facilitate the purchase of some of that property with the intent of transferring the ownership to the city. Western Rivers has then closed on the property, which is why we are now bringing the lease before the city for city council approval. We did bring it before the Recreation Board, and they did recommend approval of this lease. Since the intent of the purchase of the property is to land with final ownership with the city, that is why we're interested in doing a lease while Western Rivers continues to apply for grants and do other fundraising to offset the cost of the purchase price. And essentially, I think of that. I'll see if you guys have any questions of myself or Dieter. This will have protections on the property. I think that is important to understand as we go into that. There's some areas that are need more protection from a wildlife perspective, but clearly we will be able to get, I believe, 1.3 miles of river trail out of it, as well as some other low-impact recreational uses.
Councilor Vihil.
Thank you. So this potential annexation won't be developed into housing?
Well, the Regis Sheffis owns property that's outside of the yellow, and his intent may still be long-term to annex and turn some of that into housing or whatever else the market might be. So that's the red area that is the remaining part that the private Regis Sheffis owns.
But within the yellow would be a conservation?
Correct.
Thank you.
Some form of that, yes.
So this really is a big deal because we get about 1.3 miles of hiking trails.
Yes, we do.
So that's good. Okay, Councilor Daniel.
Thank you, Mayor.
You're welcome.
Heather, I'm looking at this, and I'm sorry if I've missed it or forgot it when I reviewed my stuff earlier. How much is the lease, and what is the length of time?
There's no charge.
There's no charge for it, it's just okay.
So there are a few requirements in that, clearly if we're working on our noxious weeds, we need to fold that into what the city's doing with its ranch efforts. We do need to do some proper signage to make sure the public knows where they can go, where they can't. Additionally, Regis Sheffis and his family were concerned of people leaving the public side and crossing over into the private. So we're moving some of those interior fences to the west to better define what that boundary is and make sure we're, as much as possible, preventing people from going onto the private side.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
That's okay. I was looking for that, and I said, I don't find a number either. I figured it's $1, so it's nothing.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay, Councilor Vihil.
If there's no further comments or questions, I move that we authorize the city manager to sign a lease with Western Rivers for property located northwest of Alamosa in Section 32.
I second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Okay, if not, start voting, please. Ms. Holly?
The motion carried unanimously.
Thank you so very much. All right. The next item I believe we rearranged is item 4H is being moved up right now as well. Am I correct?
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
All right.
So Mayor, there's been a lot of presentations on this, and I don't want to take up a lot of time, but I also want to make sure council is caught up with maybe some what changes that were presented to the public last Friday, and some changes that may have occurred following some of those public meetings, and to emphasize maybe certain areas that will address some of the questions, but by no means will it probably address everything. So as a reminder, on January 24th, council held a work session, and that's when you heard this presentation and saw the exhibits for about approximately 35 acres. At that point in time, you determined that you're open enough to the concept that we could do an RFP process and determine if there's proposals and get a specific proposal in order for you to determine how interested you are. We did do that process. It closed, and we received the one proposal which we started with. There was no other proposal submitted. The developer, I know, in addition to Friday's meeting, I think it was mentioned that they had also held a meeting out at the golf course with the golf membership, and they anticipate having another meeting next week with residents out in that area. So they are continuing to reach out and share this information and receive feedback on that. From attending the Friday meeting, it was a full crowd. I think you could probably see that from the pictures in the newspaper, and Ruth, of course, does a great job of covering those items. I would say a lot of those comments were very similar to what you've been receiving through the internet, and people submitting those comments via email and those types of things. I feel that it was a very respectful and civil discussion, and everyone deserves credit for that. I think there definitely wasn't 100% consensus on everything, but it was good for people to hear maybe what some of the higher level concerns were compared to just general concerns as well. There was some good discussion on detailing in, and I'll show it on a map, in regards to areas of the development that might be more sensitive for certain members of the public than other areas, and those types of considerations. I will highlight from the proposal that was submitted that staff is working with a developer in regards to questions and ideas staff has, in addition to looking at their timeline. We're thinking that the PUD process wasn't 100% clear, and so there's going to need to be a little bit more in that timeline of the upfront architectural and design before the actual approval of the PUD and some of those things. So we're making sure that we're having those discussions and being clear on what those requirements are. Since the initial presentation to council, where I believe the number of spots was around 500, the developer has reduced that. They reduced it to last Friday, but they've reduced it even further down to 325 as of today. And so I think it's a fairly important change that's been made, because I think some of the preliminary comments we were receiving is that a little bit of a sticker shock with the 500 number. There's still some that probably don't agree with the 325, but it has come down to 325. The change that has been made since last Friday is, if you look at this property on the southwest, and my little doesn't work very well, where the trail runs, as of last Friday, it was shown with RV spots in that area. I don't know if I click on something else, if it shows up better. There we go. That was shown as having RV spots there. At this point in time, they've removed that. The property owners are Leroy and Butch, and they haven't 100% committed to how much of a role they're going to play. I think they remain supportive of the project, but their property may or may not be included in it. I will say this area was identified Friday night as one of the areas for those who utilize the trail as being a little bit more critical. I think people shared the opinion that if you have RVs right up against the trail, that would change what the feel is when you're out there walking on the trails. This area right here is the area both in the proposal and during presentations that was highlighted as a potential swap. We have put in our request to get an appraisal. We hope to have that within the next few weeks. The appraisal will be on the ranch property. We have also encouraged the developer to receive an appraisal on any property they would be potentially looking to put up for a swap. And that is this property at this point in time, without further conversations, is what they have identified for Friday and in the proposal. We've had some conversations with them, and some of the people Friday night commented that this looks like a very lush green lawn, and really we'd like it to maybe stay a little bit more of the natural habitat and some of those ideas. There's no concerns there from the developer. I think the city staff would have the same desire, is not to see this developed as a lawn, but maybe cleaned up a little bit, but stay more from a natural habitat perspective. And so those discussions are being had. You can see here the Rio Bravo. There was quite a bit of time spent on the discussion of, is there still going to be public access? Is there going to be gates? What is this going to look like of how RVs will travel, in addition to the vehicles themselves? It was made clear from the developer that they plan to pave this as well as the disc golf course parking lot, and there will be nothing here that will hinder public access to any of those amenities. They will potentially look at doing gates for the entrances to the RV park itself, but they have not fully designed those. But there will not be any gates that would prevent access to the archery range or the disc golf course. You can see here, if I scroll down, that there is still the plan with the remaining private development to turn it into residential. And I think that's something that was consistent with the first presentation, and it's remained consistent through the public presentations and the proposal that we have received. There was concern expressed on two different levels. The first one I'll address is related to RVs and what the traffic pattern of RVs would be. I feel, based on the information shared by those who do RVs and listening to what they have to say, is most of the RV traffic is probably not going to be on any interior streets unless they did not bring a car and they're going to need to go to Walmart. But even then, they will probably use North River to 17th to the highway to Walmart or any of the other stores. So, and I say Walmart because we don't have RV parking in the downtown, not because I'm sending people to Walmart. But that would most likely be the RV. They talk about you can't turn these machines around very easily. They're expensive. You don't want to hit a speed bump. You don't want low-hanging branches. They're not going to go onto roads that they're not sure of what they're going to come up with. The other level, though, of traffic that was expressed from a concern perspective is when they're towing the vehicles once they've parked and they're going to go out and about and make their economic impact, as it was worded. There is concern expressed of the numbers, if they're at full capacity at 325, what that would look like. I will share with you and the public, that when we have developments that are this size, we normally require a traffic study. So I would imagine that this would be the same requirement that we would have. This is something I've already shared with a developer, that we would look at requiring a traffic study for not only what the impact would be on North River, but if we do anticipate State Street to be the main way for those vehicles to access Alamosa, we would want them to take a look at that as well. So that is a requirement. It's not something that staff recommends they do unless there's enough of a strong feel that this is still an opportunity. We're trying to balance how much we want a developer to expend of their funds without knowing how strong of a chance they might stand on the project coming to realization. We did share with council. I'm getting to it, but thank you. We did share with council, and we wanted to make sure we're consistent with this, that we've talked to Alan Simpson, who is the current leasee on the ranch. He does use this area. He does recognize, yes, it's 35 acres out of, almost 1,200 that he's using. He's not necessarily in favor of it, but he also recognizes that this probably would not hurt his operation that much. Along the same lines, based on both council discussion and I guess staff, the developer has looked at potentially moving the independent ditch, which would then move it over here and allow for this portion to be shifted even further away from the archery range and the disc golf course. We would want to make sure that we take a look at that from an engineering perspective with the sloping and all of those types of things, but it is something in the proposal that they have identified that they are willing to do in order to add more space there. As the city attorney was whispering to me, is the importance that staff's recommendation to council is that this would be contingent on it being a public or a planned unit development, PUD is what that's called. The reason we feel that the PUD is important is it allows for that discussion with a developer and council on what the setbacks need to be, what the landscaping needs to be. If you look at their proposal, there are certain considerations that they've identified, which I think everyone would think are very positive, such as quiet hours, the type of exterior lighting that they're going to use, generators that are not allowed while staying at the resort, the hedging that they may do around it. Those types of considerations we think would be very important if council were to consider either swapping or allowing the purchase of this city property. The value of the PUD is it does allow for that exchange, and it allows for those types of requirements. Additionally, it allows for us to have requirements that this does not turn into a trailer park where someone's going to move a trailer in, wrap the skirt around, and they're going to be living there type of thing. It reinforces the business plan that the developers have talked about, which is membership driven, 2 weeks, then they leave, those types of considerations. Additionally, should the developers decide to sell this in 20 years or 10 years or something like that, this runs with the property, not with the owner. And that's the other valuable aspect of the planned unit development. I'm just taking a quick look. Julie did mention that actually, Julie and I had probably had discussions even before this came onto the city's radar on the value of taking a look at a plan for the ranch and maybe adding some more specificity to that. And trying to do a public outreach process and those types of things. And I think that still remains true, and I think I've shared with several that we are going to look. We shared with the rec board that we don't think we need to get a grant, we don't think we need to bring in some consultants or anything like that, that we will do very good on public outreach. We'll do the charrettes where we have the maps and people can draw on them and all of those types of things. Dan is currently reading all of the materials that were submitted to the ranch board. There's multiple studies that were done, both from environmental, wildlife, those types of things that were done when the ranch plan was being compiled. And so this next year, under the umbrella of the rec board, we would recommend doing that public outreach and looking at potentially updating the ranch plan. Another aspect when we were discussing this with the Recreation Board is, you think you ask all the right questions, and then someone will ask you something that catches you off guard. When we looked at the water augmentation plan, we used the ranch property, or a significant portion of the ranch property, as collateral. And so the question was, is this a part of that ranch that we used as collateral? And there is a section, I'll go to the attorneys, this yellow hashtag that's above the green line is the portion that we would need to look at releasing that. We don't anticipate that would be a big deal, either because we've made some payments or there's other parts of the ranch that we could encumber. But it would probably take 4 to 6 weeks. And so we would not start that process until council had probably made a decision on if it's interested. So it's not really, it's not necessarily that much, but we wanted to make sure council was aware of those items. And I think that is everything I have to cover in regards to an update. I know you've been reading the emails and taking into consideration those aspects as well.
Okay, thank you, Heather. So, council, what we're going to do right now, I'm going to allow everyone to ask Heather some questions, and then Heather, after that, Councilor Vigil had made a recommendation that we have Don Spencer and Eric Olson come up here so we can ask them some questions too, okay? All right, so council, any questions you have? Councilor Vigil?
Thank you, Mayor. I have a lot of, I think we all have a lot of questions and comments and concerns. I'll get to my comments and concerns later, but just some questions on what you just presented to us, Heather. The PUD, I think that was a big thing for me when we first started hearing about this. In the PUD process, will council or the community have direct input on that, or are there laws and rules that we would just apply to this?
It would be a discussion that begins with staff and the developer. I mean, obviously, we're having discussions right now, but staff would be working very closely with the developer. When we do these, if you have a future meeting and talk about what's important to you, that will be folded in. But the first step is then it goes to the Planning Commission. The preliminary PUD goes to the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission then makes a recommendation to council, and so you'd have input at that point as well. The developer would go work on that, and then the final, again, goes through the same process. It goes back to the Planning Commission and then back to City Council.
Thank you, Heather.
Actually, what I was whispering to Heather was that during that PUD process is when traffic studies would be required. So as part of the PUD process, typically we would require the traffic study because the PUD is going to have to address traffic flow and what needs to happen with respect to that traffic flow. And those steps in front of both the Planning Commission and in front of Council that Heather was talking about are also involved with public hearings along the way, like typical land use hearings are.
Okay, thank you. A couple more questions I had. Going off the traffic studies, can a city like ours make an ordinance not allowing RVs to go through residential areas to guarantee that they wouldn't go through?
You could certainly close certain streets to tonnage vehicles.
Okay. And then another question I had is, you talked about a traffic study. With the potential of this project, can we ask for an environmental study, environmental impact?
The recommendation that staff's made to the developer is that they need to research the state and federal requirements, and that if a study is required, that they would need to conduct that as part of the process.
So I guess that'll be a question for them later. And finally, is there a ranch plan?
Yes, there is a ranch plan.
Okay.
And it was adopted by council. There was a lot of studies done during that time, so sometimes we need to make sure we're being very particular about the language that we use. There's a lot of interested individuals, a lot of interested groups in what the future of the ranch was going to be. And so some of those studies, some of those plans might be a little bit more to one side or the other than what the final ranch plan is. The ranch plan, I would say, a majority of it talks about what needs to be done to manage the property for ranching purposes, how the cattle need to be moved and irrigated and all of those types of things. It does break out the parcels, and it identifies what's there on the parcel. Some of it identifies maybe some recreational areas, but I will say overall in the opening, it does talk about potential economic development, but it's not specific to any location.
And when was this plan created?
I don't know when it was created. I think it was adopted in 2012, or is updated in 2012.
And this was done by the ranch board or the rec board?
It was worked on by the ranch board, but council's the one that adopted it.
Okay, thank you.
Just to get back to your question about environmental studies, the feds may have requirements with respect to wetlands issues that the developer would need to address. I don't believe the feds have any other environmental kind of studies that they would require. So if we wanted to require something, that would be on our hook to do, beyond the wetland stuff, which the Army Corps of Engineers and the I think it would be the Army Corps of Engineers that would have the jurisdiction over wetlands issues, if they have any jurisdictional wetlands there, which I have no idea.
Thank you.
Councilor Carson and then Councilor Brawls.
Like Councilor Vihil, I have a ton of questions and more than I can probably ask tonight. With or without a traffic study, there's going to be a traffic impact, period. We know that. That's a given. Part of the comprehensive plan that was adopted by the previous council and that we're moving forward with now is a big development on First Street. It's in bad shape. I've driven down it and checked it out. It needs some work. Once that work is done, or as that work progresses, we're going to introduce all this new heavy traffic to it. And in the first few years of that new pavement, it's going to get beat up pretty bad if that traffic increases through there. And if you go to that ranch and GPS Walmart or a business on the west side of town, your quickest route is First Street. You're going to go up First Street. And if you have an RV and you take a look at State Street and First Street's pretty big and it's wide. And I don't think people would be too afraid to drive an RV down it. There's going to be impact on the road to the golf course, right, around the turns. There's a walking path there. There's going to be these big vehicles going through there. Now, one of my concerns is that we're going to have to upgrade infrastructure. We're going to have to beef it up. I'm the counselor in Ward 4, and I've voiced my concerns about infrastructure already. Now, being that First Street is first, it's first in line, where's the money going to come from to upgrade this infrastructure out there? And how's that going to affect other parts of town that have been neglected? That's one of my big concerns, and that's primarily my concern. I mean, again, Ward 4, we have several streets without streetlights. RV people are going to demand streetlights. We're going to need more lighting out there. If you go out to that area and sit there for 10 minutes, again, you see 20 runners come through there on any day, and it's not going to be too long before someone gets irked with that. And we know that to be true. And that's going to affect that relationship there. But my concern, and to get back to the question, where's that money going to come from? Have we thought about that money? Have we worked that into the comprehensive plan? Because there's going to be tons of work that needs to be done there in order to get this ready for that kind of traffic. And that's something that we have to consider really heavily, especially going into this project on First that we're going to sink all this money into. It's been something that the previous council was worked hard on, they believed in, and now this has been brought to the table, and I agree with people, it's moved really fast. I feel like it's moved really fast, and I have a ton of questions, and I'm not nearly convinced at all, so I need to understand where that money's going to come from.
Thank you, sir.
Is that a question you want me to answer now, or? I mean, I'll tell you, and this isn't going to be a popular answer, but I feel like I need to just say what it is. Essentially, when you talk infrastructure for the water lines, the sewer lines, the electricity, the paving of the roads, both interior and what they're calling Rio Bravo Rio Bravo Boulevard will be paid by the developer. It's very clear that the community has concerns about the impact of traffic outside of that would not traditionally be paid by the developer. Our initial impression is the type of behavior you will be looking at with these vehicles, they're not all driving to work at 8 and getting off work at 5. There's the behavior of the vehicles is different than what you see with a residential area where you see peak times and those types of things. We do not anticipate there to be issues, but again, we would want a traffic study to verify that. So I know that may not be a popular opinion right now because it doesn't seem to be in line with what people think is going to happen, but that is our initial thoughts, and we would put way heavily on the traffic study, and if that shows something differently. But in regards to funding for infrastructure, any of the interior would be funded by the developer.
No, I was talking about in the area, around the streets, going to streetlights in that area. That's what I'm talking about, and how that money's going to be offset from, other parts of town. That's my concern. Is we're going to have to. It's a safety issue. If there's an area of the road that's too small, and you have this massive vehicle driving through there, it's the cities or the state, whoever's responsible for that road, to make it safer. And that's going to hit us. It's going to be a cost that we're going to incur. It's just, I think it's a given. And that's going to affect other parts of town that need addressing. That's my concern. And now if it's a question, that can't be answered tonight, we need to talk about it.
Okay. Okay. And once again, council, we're not making any decisions today. We're going to have a few more meetings at least, if I'm not mistaken, Heather. But we are just basically trying to have a discussion tonight. And next is Councilor Brawls, and then Councilor Hensley.
Yeah, 2 or 3 questions. According to that map up there, phase 2, right, is that
Is the southern one. Phase 2 is the southern portion that's on the existing private property.
so that's owned privately, right?
Correct.
Where the 30 acres is at. So the 35 acres, that's phase 1.
Phase 1, which is the city property.
City property.
Correct.
How far is that from the city, from the river? Do you know how far approximately that is?
Don, do you happen to know how far?
Half a mile.
Half a mile?
Half a mile, okay. And where's the water coming from? Are they going to have to put in the water lines?
They will
and the sewer lines?
They will put in the water and the sewer. It terminates near where your residential development ends, down in this area. So they will run it the rest of the way. They also want to bring those services to the lots that they hope to develop on a residential basis.
And we think there's enough water to run
I think
through the
our
lines?
preliminary discussion, Mark, if you want to come up or correct me if I'm wrong, but our preliminary analysis is that our system is fine handling it. We want to make sure that the infrastructure that's put in, should there be other types of growth, that it's able to have the design to handle that. But from an impact to the system, Mark, if you want to answer that.
So as to water and water flow, there is a 10-inch crossing that crosses the Rio Grande and currently supplies the Cottonwood subdivision. That line was intentionally oversized to handle the future development that is the southern part of the proposal, and the rest of the development would easily be handled by that size of line. We also would like the developer to consider looping the portion of the project so that we would eventually loop. This wouldn't completely loop to State Street, but we would come down and have a loop that would join up with the water line in front of the clubhouse, the golf course clubhouse. But this is all preliminary. We haven't looked at the engineering impacts, and that would come at a later time when we're in the PUD process. So, but it does look totally feasible from a water standpoint. We have reserve capacity in the plant to supply this development with very comfortably. Sewer, additionally, the developer would have to put in a lift station, but our sewer system should be able to handle that just fine.
Okay. My next question is, there was a comment that it would destroy wetlands. The 35 acres of the ranch, there's no wetlands on that, is there?
To our knowledge, I believe there are some in the public that have a different opinion, and so that's why our direction is to the developer that they would need to determine if they need to do a study or not.
On the 35 acres?
Correct.
Those are my questions.
Okay, Counselor Hensley?
All right, let's see. So my first one is, it was brought up about when the ranch was initially purchased, it was for water augmentation.
It was.
So I wanted you to explain a little more.
Yeah. It was mainly, the first was dirt, because it was when we were building the levee, and so it was dirt, and we viewed the water rights as valuable as well. As you know, as we've progressed into our water augmentation, because of the restrictions on the Excelsior ditch, we cannot use that directly for our augmentation plan. The independent ditch we could, but that's not the direction we decided to head from an augmentation plan. It is used as our catastrophic part of the augmentation plan, that should something fail, this is a resource we have type of situation, but it's not directly used for the augmentation plan.
Okay, thank you. And then can we, on this map that you have, and so only because I'm not very good, I guess, at looking at maps. So where the golf course, I guess, could you show me with your little wiggly thing that you're using, where some of the houses are that are around the golf course?
The ones that have not been built, or the ones
No, the ones that are built.
Okay, so unfortunately with this map, it does not go.
So there's no houses right now that are where, so when we're looking at this map.
If you look at my squiggly thing that's in the white area.
Yep.
This is the area that they would start picking. Well, you took, okay.
So I put up the other map, which showed the ranch collateral stuff, and the houses would be under the legend, essentially, on this map.
Okay. Can we go back to the other one just for, so that helps me think.
Okay, and so on this map, it would be down in this area.
Okay, so the green spot that you said looked lush and isn't, okay.
Yes.
That, when we had our initial one, had some development on it, but that's not what we're thinking potentially of the trade.
Potentially, yes. They are getting an appraisal on this portion of the property.
Then where we see all the white squares.
Like over on the
Yes.
side here, yes.
That is potential building more houses.
Of residential houses, yes.
And so those are already zoned for that to happen anyway, or
Yeah.
close to, or.
They are zoned for residential development. They've talked about making them bigger lots. I have not compared the numbers that they show here to what the original plat is. Eric?
The ones that are shown there, I think, are the ones that are platted. They're already platted as lots.
Okay.
On a subdivision.
And then I think my last one is, I know there's a lot of discussion about the walking and running path. Could you kind of show me, if you know, where that is in this whole?
Well, I don't know of the ones, there's been a lot of non-dedicated use out there. And I think some people were walking in this private area that's to the east here, not realizing it was private. But when I've read some of the emails and listened to, well, look at that. So when I read some of the emails and listened to the public comment, I think there was some recreational use here, low level, just people bird watching. I know we had concerns from some of the property owners further south that prompted us to close off that dirt road because of kids having fun, I guess, out there. But really, I think people were bird watching and walking their dogs and doing some of that stuff there. The other main area is the trail system that's over here on this side right here. Whether or not there's been some more in this area, again, that's not something the city has designated. So I would imagine if someone's been walking around in this area, it's the same as when they were walking around in this area. They're not dedicated trails.
Okay. I think that's all I have for right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Carson, and then Counselor Daniel.
Heather, I have two questions for you, then one for the developers. It's been mentioned about the lodging tax. Was that looked into, and would we be eligible for that?
They are the ones that have researched that, so we'll let them answer that question. So if Don or whoever the spokesperson will be, if someone wants to make their way up, or Eric, I'm not sure.
Yeah, if you can make your way up, but I wanted to allow Counselor
Carson,
Daniel to finish. I mean, we're going to have questions for the developers in a minute, but you all can make your way up. That'll be fine. But I wanted all the council to have an opportunity to ask you all of their questions
Okay,
first.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Who does the traffic study?
We would require them to contract with a certified traffic engineer to conduct
They
the
would, or
study.
we would, and who would pay for it?
They would pay for it.
Thank you.
Uh-huh. Okay,
Counselor
I
Daniel.
think I have my questions now. So moving the independent ditch, when we talked about that the first time, that maybe just scares me because I've never moved a ditch. But Mark, I was like, you usually sit in the back, sorry. Have you worked with organizations or places that have done that before? Is that a normal property thing?
Yes, I've moved ditches before.
Okay.
It's a engineering exercise that needs to be done. I think I voiced that staff concern. It just needs to be analyzed and engineered so that we don't reduce our flow to the Blanca Vista ponds.
Okay.
And somehow impair our ability to deliver that water where we want it.
Okay.
So I think it's totally doable, and I think that if it's not, we'll find another option to make that happen.
Okay, and when we've talked about that, would that be our cost, the city moving the ditch,
No.
or would that be
No.
developer cost?
That would be developer cost.
They're proposing to move it, so they would stand that cost.
Okay. And then Heather, I think the explanation you just gave about that, the trail that people have been saying and what the developer said was the private property, that's the trail you were talking about, right? Like in the Gulf, like that part? Okay.
So there's when people talk trails, I think they mean different things. This is the one that's along the levee, and is definitely, most normal people think this is a trail and I say it that way because we do need to look into the easements and in private property and some things like that, but that definitely feels like a trail and it's part of the levee. If we have an easement, it is probably only a maintenance easement and not a public access easement. But I do think people have been utilizing over here. Now, I will mention from an Inspire perspective, we had talked about enhancing some of the trail stuff through here. And there was maybe one that went this way that we would want to make it go like this, but all the trails for the Inspire were also kind of looped around in through this area and would be fine.
Okay, thank you for that. Oh.
Yes, Mark?
The trail next to the river, it's not a levee, it's a dike. And the levee, I use that language kind of specifically. The levee is our protection system that we maintain. There is a dike there that is a former, I don't know when it was created, but it's not part of our levee system. So
That's important.
So I wanted to make sure that's a dike, not the levee.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
And can we go back to the one with the hash marks on it? So in this development, 26.2 acres, and we had planned for 54 to use as leverage. Is that what that is?
Well, so this was drafted up very quickly this afternoon when I asked Deacon Aspinwall, our GPS guy, to give us a visual of what it is that needs to be released. And I said, well, take what absolutely has to be released, which is where there's 26.2 acres that overlaps what is currently ranch collateral, and then also just make it bigger because we don't know exactly where this thing's going, and let's see what we're looking at.
Okay. So that 54 is not the rest of the property that we had on the...
Oh, no, we have much, much more
That's
that's
what I
ranch
thought.
collateral.
Okay.
Yeah, it's 700 or 800 acres.
Okay, great. Thank you for that clarification.
Councilor Carson, do you have a question for Heather, or was it?
It's for the developer.
Okay. Well, I have one question for Heather then before we go to the developer. I know from reading all of the emails and having conversations with a lot of different people, somehow a conversation has come up about the land swap. Heather, is there any way you can elaborate and talk a little bit about what type of land swap discussions have come up and why that particular piece of property, so we can have a little more clarity? Thank you.
And I think we've seen a full range of land swap discussions. I think it just started out in regards to, is there some of the land that's in the golf course that can be swapped for this property? I think my impression from listening to people is that this land that's in the golf course is more interesting from a habitat perspective, from a wildlife perspective. This land up here, it has one tree. I was saying no trees, but it has one tree right there. That's not to mean that it's not great land, but I don't think it's as interesting land to the public as within the golf course. And so I think the concept of maybe there's more value to the public to get a land swap than money. Now, the other thing that comes into consideration from a negotiation perspective is they are getting an appraisal, and what most people can tell you is this is not platted, it's zoned agricultural, and so it's going to appraise at agricultural. This is zoned residential, and it's already platted residential, so it will appraise residential. So most likely, this is going to be a higher appraisal value. The question is, and I didn't want to get into negotiating with a developer because they've been very good to work with, and I don't want them to feel unneeded pressure. But I really kind of prompted them to think, how much land do you need for your business plan to work? And if you could do a swap, does it have to be one for one from a value perspective, or can there be a little bit more as well? And so we didn't have any further discussions. They're processing that on their own and thinking through some of that. But the impression I have is this especially, but again, these property owners are not yet in the partnership. So that's not something they can negotiate with right now, but that was identified as a critical area. Unfortunately, because of the public use, I think this would probably be identified as another area, but that's probably the most prime from a residential development perspective. And then I'm not sure from a public what this value is seen of the two interior. I think it's all seen as valuable. I just don't know how it would rate up against each other.
Okay.
Did that answer your question, Mayor?
Yes, it did. Thank you
Okay.
very much, Heather. Okay, now, council, we have the developer up here, Don Spencer. Feel free to start asking him questions, and I'll start off with Councilor Carson.
Yes, sir.
How's it going? My first question is, why? Why start on this piece of land if the private land is already a go-ahead? That's my main question, is why not, and this is what I would pose to everybody, I guess. If that were to happen, if phase one were in the private property, we would then have a chance to actually see if there was an economic impact, to view it in a real-time, situation. But why that piece of land first? That's my first question.
The city property.
Yes.
First. The development cost will be less for us is one reason.
Okay. Makes sense.
The access to it and the impact to the golf course and to the other areas is lessened as a result of that. So it's basically an economic decision that we're making. We can go build the 200 spaces there quicker and more unimpeded than we would be going to the golf course. I think is the short answer.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
I believe, Carson, did you also have the question on the lodging tax?
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry about that. What did you guys find out on that?
Yeah, the lodging tax would be applied for the non-membership spaces. We've done a economic impact report. It's in your packet. I don't know if you've had a chance to review it. And with the help of Councilmember Hensley and her program at ASU, we have identified 7 categories of benefits, examples for impact. The tax is $20,000 a year. Let me just start them off from the top. Operational expenditures, $133,500 a year. Employee spending, $376,000. Events and visitors, $6,770,000 a year. Tax impact, $20,160 a year. The tax impact for construction is $50,000, and the healthcare impact is $107,000. There's multipliers that were applied. All these numbers were provided to the program from our cost estimators in our business plan, so that by the time that's all applied with multipliers, it's $12,705,000 a year for this project, economic impact for Alamosa primarily, and the county and the area in general.
And the creation of 8.5 jobs.
Yes, the creation of 8.5 jobs. Our total employees are 17, with an employer multiplier of 0.5. So it's significant. It's significant. The tax impact would be applied for lodging.
Thank you. Councilor Rawls?
Well, I'm just going to make a comment. I'm glad you reduced the number of spaces.
But yes, it seemed to be.
Did you reduce down to 325 or 300?
325.
325.
325. Yeah, we reduced some over the last few days along the levee. That's the Leroy and Butch's property. They are very supportive of the project, and they are really kind of ambivalent about even selling. So that we've moved any plans to take those off, which we've in the beginning talked with them about. But as the discussions have gone on, this seems to be the prudent thing to do, and it's fine with us in terms of our numbers and what we're trying to achieve.
And what's your feelings about the land swap? Is that considering?
Excuse me?
The land swap, what's your feelings about that?
Well, we think we've identified a great piece of property to swap. It's got challenges for home building around the fairways, access, roads. We know that a lot of replatting is going to have to be done because of the golf course. From the original replatting was like 1978. So a lot of consideration was not given to how to access some of these plats, these home sites. We're discovering that. So that area is an area that's trapped inside that has some very nice vegetation and a nice area. So it's our belief that that is a really nice one to pick. The rest of the ones, as Heather was saying, along the eastern side are prime home sites that we would like to develop and bring access and utilities to, as well as the ones more in southern that you can't see. But the swap, we believe that's a nice area that we can connect. And Heather, can you show up on the top where the structure, the historic structures are in that piece? Our desire is to develop that as a park that's available to the public, and it has some historic structures in there that we want to renovate and bring back up to maybe not the original condition, but closer, and connect that with trails that get to the interior of the one we're wanting to swap. So it seemed to be a natural connection there that is a reasonable thing for us as developers and for the city and the public to enjoy. And we would leave that in whatever condition that's desired. There's a lot of fallen trees there. There's some good trees that we could make better with trimming. So we're just in discussions with staff about how to do that.
Councilor Hensley, then Councilor Vio.
So obviously, there's always risk whenever you do anything like this.
Excuse me?
There's always risk whenever you.
Of course, yes, yeah.
So I've definitely had some questions and some concerns from different people. What if this doesn't work out? And again, I'm not trying to think anything negative, but what if it does fail or it isn't as successful as you thought? Do you think out?
We don't like to think that way.
I know, and I know we don't, but at the same time.
Well, all I can say is that we're very well trained to do this. Myself personally, I'm an architect. I've been doing this for 40 years. We have resources, financial resources that are quite substantial behind us to execute this plan, or I, as a professional, wouldn't be involved in it. So I'm personally convinced that we have the financial strength and the resolve to do a really nice project to achieve the things we've been saying we want to do. And so my experience is when you've got good design, the proper funds to execute it, and a plan to operate it properly, then there's a high chance of success. So we really don't think too much about failure.
Thank you very much.
Sorry.
No, I thank you for your answer. And then my other question, and I did read through this and I may have missed it, so I apologize if I'm asking for something you wrote in this. Well, there was different discussions in the different conversations we had where how much of it was going to be sort of that timeshare model, and how much of it is
for the public.
Yes.
Well, we haven't settled on an exact number yet, but we're thinking 50 to 100. Eric, my partner, agrees with me. 50 to 100 spaces for public, meaning anybody that wants to come into a beautiful place and stay for as long as they want, it's available, can do that. The rest would be memberships. So let's say out of 325, maybe there's 225 that are memberships.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, at the most, probably.
If I could jump in, the previous line of questioning was related to the residential development, and the map we're using here didn't show, so I'm pulling one of your older maps.
Right, okay.
But the question is, you would probably still look to develop this as residential as well?
As residential, and we would definitely relook at replatting it. As I mentioned, I think the platting was done coincidentally with the golf course maybe going in, and so there's not a lot thought out in terms of access to these. So we will have to make that look differently. But the general area, yes, that's housing.
Okay.
And we'd be bringing utilities to that in the whole process of bringing utilities to our project.
Thank you. Councilor Vihil?
Thank you, Mayor. Don, thank you for being here tonight.
Absolutely.
I appreciate you and your team for listening. I'm sure you've gotten a lot of concerns and questions from the public as well. And as Mr. Broyle said, I also appreciate you going down from 500 spaces to 325. I think that's huge for a lot of people. If you could, I have a few questions and a big question at the end. If you could just give me a yes or a no on some of these questions, that'd be great. If this happens, will you pave that road to the disc golf course?
Yes, that road which is now dirt, is basically following the same configuration as the dirt road is.
And that road will remain open to the public at all times?
Open to the public.
And be
paved like a 36-foot wide road.
Okay. And the parking lot at the disc golf course, will you pave that as well?
Yes, that's our commitment.
Okay. And then there were some discussions about the archery range and how it's kind of off. It's off-center. Would you help maybe fix that so it doesn't affect your project?
Well, we would. We're committed to doing that. In the last iteration, when we moved everything closer to River Road and relocate the ditch, we got even further away from the archery range. So it's a question that we still have is we want to see someone shoot a biggest crossbow they can and see where it goes. Because, you know, if it's a problem, and I haven't personally observed it, then we would like to pay to re-angle it in some fashion. Cool. Wouldn't be a problem.
Thank you. And then I guess the overarching question, and one that I've gotten a lot over the last 3 weeks, is why Alamosa? Why do you want to do this project here in Alamosa?
Well, my wife and I live in Alamosa first. We love Alamosa. We have tried to identify many other areas, and we have migrated, regardless of not whether we live here, we've kept migrating back here because it's underserved. It's underserved for the culture, RV culture, that is growing by leaps and bounds. We know that the sand dunes is backed up with several years out with reservations. The closest really of this caliber that we're going to even exceed that is in Fun Valley and South Fork. There's a huge market for this type of facility in this area. Alamosa is a wonderful place, great location, close to so many wonderful things to do with recreationally, and we're familiar with it. So, I mean, we're committed to Alamosa. We chose this because of, number one, the unmet needs that we feel can be met here and be done well, and its access to all of the beautiful amenities that we have. It's a hub. It's a hub that many people pass through and don't have an option to stay if they're leading this lifestyle.
Councilor Broyles?
Yeah, I wrote this down, I forgot to ask. But you do have the capital and the financing to do the project.
Yes. Yes, this is about an $8 million project.
So it's not going to be half finished and not go through.
No, we're getting a line of credits. It's being set up at Alamosa State Bank. We'll be supplying a letter to council from Alamosa State Bank, from our investors and our group to basically certify that we have the strength to do it. And we're ready to do that.
Mr. Spencer, I would like to thank you and your team for hosting that meeting this past Friday. Council purposely did not attend because we didn't want to interfere with the comments made on behalf of the residents here in Alamosa. But it's very important for council to hear about feedback and get input and things like that from the community members. If you don't mind, could you just share with council some of the takeaways that you received from that meeting this past Friday from the community members who voiced their concerns?
Yes. We had a number of comments, mostly centered around the ranch management plan and the need to, I think one of the things I went away from, and we totally agree, is a need in the future for council to re-examine the ranch management plan and come up with a roadmap of how future development, which I know is desirable, where it would occur and what would be allowed in what areas, and that was a comment. Traffic is a comment, and we are agreed with, Heather and I have spoken about this, having a traffic impact study. Very agreeable with that. We're going to be contacting the NRCS about wetlands map, and that's the next thing we're doing. We had many comments about the enjoyment of the natural terrain, the wooded trees, and, the trail, and these sorts of comments, which motivated us to move towards speaking to Leroy Butch about not showing anything on their side, and they're totally agreeable. So that was a major one that came out of it that I think addresses a lot of the concerns about keeping that unimpeded access through and minimize the impact of what we're doing on the southern side. Other things, well, there's just so much was said, but that's the general recap of what I remember and the general condition of what the comments were. Traffic, impact to the houses that are quite far away, frankly, from our facility, and how we would deal with that. And we are more than happy to continue having conversations with folks and meeting. We've got one next week with the Homeowners Association. We're going to be presenting there for them. And it's Tuesday night at 5:30 over at Cottonwoods. We met with the golf board last night, golf membership committee, and had a good meeting there. So, we're kind of in our stride with talking about it and happy to do that.
Okay, and also I've noticed since this project began, your group have made some adjustments to your plans. One, reducing the spaces down from 500 to about maybe 325. Another one, maybe not developing the part close to the Riverwalk, and then possibly negotiating a land swap. In your business model, with these adjustments, along with paving the disc golf course and paving the road to the disc golf course, in your business model, are you still able to make a profit and make sure that this facility is sustainable?
Well, we will do very well, quite frankly. And in cutting back 150 spaces is less, but we're very satisfied, and we've got the financing to do everything we promised to do. So our business model worked at a higher level before, but it works just fine for us right now. And we anticipated that from the beginning.
Okay, thank you. That's all the questions I have, but Councilor Carson has a question.
Where, geographically, what's the closest RV park of this size that's near here?
I guess it would be Fun Valley.
No, Fun Valley's 250, you said, in our work session, is that what you said?
Fun Valley's in South Fork. That would be the largest one, Eric?
It's like 375,
400 spaces.
Fun Valley is?
Yeah, so that would be the comparable one to this. And they are overloaded. They have to turn people back daily. there. And we want them to come here.
Okay. Thank you so very much,
Okay,
Mr.
thank you,
Spencer.
everybody.
And
Appreciate it.
council, any other questions? Okay, thank you so
Okay,
very
thank
much.
So I
Thank you,
think
staff.
the other part of this discussion that we wanted to prompt staff or council to have is a discussion on the next steps. As mentioned in the council communication, if council remains interested in taking this into consideration, we can take some of this feedback, we can have communication with the developer, we will continue to have on the website for public input and those types of avenues as well. But we would recommend, if you're interested in next Wednesday, the 28th, using that work session to allow for continued discussion and questions. We can also have a time dedicated for public input at that time again, for those who weren't able to make it, and those who are here tonight may have additional thoughts. And then we would also recommend, just in case, not knowing what direction that conversation could go in, if council remains interested and wants to direct staff more from a confidential negotiation perspective, that we post an executive session as a potential. It's not one that you would need to do. And clearly, if council decides it's not interested, then we wouldn't be negotiating. But should you want to direct staff from a negotiation perspective, we want to make sure that's posted appropriately. But it could be that you want to wait and do that, something like that at a future meeting as well.
Okay. Council, do you have any comments in regards to Heather's recommendation? Yes, Councilor Daniel?
Oh, sorry, I started off. I think using next week's work session makes a lot of sense to continue this discussion. I am in favor in protecting ourselves with an executive session. I'm not sure we'll be there, but I think that just is logical and makes sense and, allows the public to know that if we get to that point next week. But I like the idea of public comment during the work session, which we don't usually have. And so I think those ideas are great.
Councilor Vijo?
I can't.
Okay, Councilor
Do you want to
Hensley?
mine off?
Okay, Councilor Hensley, Councilor Brawls, and then Councilor Vijo.
Mine's really quick. So I'm also in agreement, and I like the idea that it's after the Tuesday session that they're doing with the housing area at the golf course. So I like that idea as well.
That was accidental, but we'll take credit for it.
Okay.
Councilor Brawls?
Yeah, I think we need to move forward with, with whatever decision we're going to make. Developers, rightly so, need to know an answer here, so I think we need to move forward and explore it with your timetable, what you said.
Thank you, Councilor Brawls. Councilor Vijo?
My mic's not working.
This mic's not working.
Hello? Oh, it is working. Okay. So, thank you. I agree with you, Mr. Burrows. We got to get going a little bit in fairness to the developers. But I want to communicate very clearly to everybody here and in Alamosa that no decision has been made. And if any of us on council have communicated that, I apologize. Whether it might be in a conversation with one of you, a phone call, or over social media, nothing has been decided yet. And we're going to keep on asking for your input. Please keep emailing us. Please keep calling us, because we value your input. And then for council, I would like to maybe see kind of where you all stand a little bit. Or do you want to wait till next week? But I think we should have that discussion a little bit.
Councilor Carson?
Where we stand as far as yay or nay? I'm not convinced. I mean, I think it's a good the economic development is good, but there's still a lot of questions. So I can't say that at this point, I may be the only one that would vote against it, because I'm not convinced. I have, one of the reasons that I came to city council and that I ran for this position was because of the things that I saw being neglected in areas where I live in other parts of town. This is going to affect that. Whether it doesn't matter how you put it, it's going to affect that. And so those are concerns that I have. Do I think it's a good idea? The idea is great. The development is great. My concern was why that piece of property first, and you answered that, and it was a fair answer. It's a logical answer. But I think, it did move forward really quick, and the public kind of was shocked. I was extremely shocked at the initial number, but I'm not convinced, and I really need to understand more how that's going to impact other areas of town and infrastructure, paving, the First Street project. We got to look at a traffic study, and we got to see what it's going to do, because it will bring more traffic. It will bring more congestion to those neighborhoods, and passing an ordinance to just ban RVs, that's a possibility, but again, that's another bridge we'd have to cross. And so I have more questions than answers right now. That's my position.
Thank you, Councilor Carson. Councilor Hensley.
So I'm not quite there to give my full opinion yet. Ward 1, without a doubt, which is my ward, is the one that's probably mostly affected directly as far as what's going to happen. I have definitely been in a lot of communication with a lot of people in my ward, and I kind of want to see what their thoughts are, because obviously, without a doubt, the developers have done a lot of compromise. And so is that making things better? Does it feel better? Where are we at? And then also the conversation that they'll have on Tuesday with the developers. I'm definitely very pro economic development, as all of you know. That's probably the campaign or the stand that I'm on when I became on City Council. But I do see both sides. So I'm going to be honest, I don't have an opinion yet. I really do feel like I need to have more conversation and do a little more research just to be 100% sure.
Thank you. Councilor Brawls.
No, I have some questions, and I appreciate the comments that were made, because that's kind of altered my opinion. It's kind of changed, and there's some things I need to explore. But I do want to, I was on the marketing district for like 13 years, and the city and the marketing district and ACED has spent hundreds of thousands of dollars marketing Alamosa as a tourist mecca. And this RV park will bring in a certain amount of tourists. And, so I'd hate to see that money in vain. But I want it done right. I don't want it to be an eyesore. I want it to fit in. And economic development is always a balance between public and private interests, between economic, ecology, and environment. And we've got to hit that perfect balance. And that's my attitude.
Thank you. Councilor Carson. And then Councilor Daniel.
In regards to next week, executive session, I agree we need to come to some decisions. I personally don't feel we're there yet. Like I said, I still have a lot of questions. So I think there needs to be more discussion. And again, I'm not trying to, I hate to do this and hurt the developer in any way as far as time goes, but I still I'm not really convinced that that's even what the people want. I mean, keep in mind, everybody's talking about an underserved area, an underserved community. One of the reasons that we've stuck it out here in the valley in hard times or good times is because we like the environment. We like the rural component of it, and I don't necessarily think that people want to change that as much as we think. The economic development is important, and I don't want to see money spent in vain. But I agree with Liz, with Councilor Hensley, that we need to really understand what the people want more than what we want, because she's right. That's her ward, and she's going to be impacted by that greatly. But we really need to understand what the people want. I believe that, most truly, and I think we're not there yet. I don't think we've had enough. I mean, this is the first time we've had an actual opportunity to comment at all to the public about this. And jumping into negotiations immediately, I think, is a bad move, in my opinion.
Thank you, Councilor Carson. Councilor Daniels, and then Councilor Henry.
Okay, we have fighting over microphone space issues. So I've been really pleased, actually, that people from all over town have started to use me in my new position, and actually I'm getting a lot of people in different places talking to me about this. For me, and maybe it's a simplification, and I don't mean to discount some of that, I still have a concern about giving a public asset to a non-public, entity, even though I'm really excited about this number of spaces. You guys have addressed the concern that I brought up at the last work session, and I appreciate that, so thank you for adjusting. I do think Councilor Hensley is right. The compromises you've made on your plan are wonderful and appreciated and recognized. I think I worry about our ranch development plan. I worry about our, the way we've looked at that, and I do think people's recollection of how that came about are all very different. We have, like, many people have told me, and I'm like, that's not actually what the plan says. And so that's been an interesting piece of just community history, I think, that we have. The thing that is exciting to me about this potential is that you guys have really thought some things through, and I don't know that I have some of the same concerns that are brought up about a business development plan. I don't have those concerns. For me, it's really about relinquishing a public asset and making sure that we're not going down a slippery slope. That's really the crux of it for me. And as I've talked to people on both sides of this issue, I think there's a balance in our community of people who have a very strong, opinion, like, absolutely we need to do this, and I'm not so sure. And then some who are dead set against it. And I think we just need to, our job is to find that balance. We talked about balance a couple times up here, and so I just really want to make sure we're thoughtful and we're proactive, and that people continue to share their thoughts with us, because I do think we all have a genuine concern about how that's going to roll out.
Thank you. Councilor Hensley, then Councilor Vihil.
So just to piggyback on what you just said, so I think I had a lot of concern there as well. I do feel a little more comfortable with the potential swap, because I do feel that swap could potentially really be a better, something that's better. So just that, something I've been thinking about. What I'd like to add is that I do have a lot of emails, but obviously there have been some changes in the proposal, and there's been some compromises. So I'd actually encourage, and I know staff's probably going to not necessarily, they are probably fine with it, but I'd encourage emails again, either directly to me or to all of us, because now with these compromises, some of the concerns are going to be different, or maybe not there anymore, because some of those concerns have been actually handled in the compromise. So for example, I know a lot of people said, hey, what about a swap? So where I'm at now is I kind of like to see, so whether it's a phone call to me, whether it's email, but I want to definitely have that conversation with people to see, where are you at now that we are where we are at this point, because that would really help me a lot. So just wanted to put that out there.
And if I could add on, obviously, people can contact their council members however they want. There is, the niceness of using the website is it allows it to come in, and we can send it to the entire council, and we're also sending it to all the department heads as well. And so when there's questions that are being raised and those types of things, we're doing research and that. But clearly, if someone wants to do a phone call or an individual email, we're not here to say not do that. But it is nice when it comes in and we're sending it in and making sure all of council is hearing all the same comments. And we're fine with the workload.
And I will add to that, it has been really nice to get it that way, that we all, no matter where anybody's located. So I encourage it to go that way, but I just want to know I am available too. But it has been awesome how we get those emails and we all get them and we see the same thing. So that is a great, so thank you.
Councilor Vihil.
Thank you, Mayor.
And then Councilor Carson.
I want to go off of kind of what Ms. Daniel said earlier, the slippery slope situation, and selling off of a public piece of property. If we say yes to these 35 acres, and then someone else comes later for 100 acres and then 200 acres here, by the time you know it, our city ranch might be gone. So that's why I think it's imperative that we have to put something in place for further development, potential development of the ranch. And that goes to, I think that, like, the fundamental question of this whole situation is, and Heather answered it a little bit, but I've heard so many different things. Why was the ranch bought? You said it was dirt and it was water. I've heard that it was also to preserve some green and open space, and I've also heard that it was bought for further economic development. Well, what is it? That's what is it? And if we can't come up with an answer, then we need to formulate something.
The ranch plan actually in its opening has the exact answer to that, and it's what the previous council adopted. Now, I can't control if the public has different opinions on that, but the ranch plan specifically has an introduction that says why the ranch was purchased. And Eric, I don't know if you're adding to that or not.
I was going to detract from it. Who cares why it was bought? It's an asset that the city has right now, and it was bought in 1995 or 7 or something. You know, here we are 30 years down the line. You got to figure out what it's for.
I agree.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Carson.
Just to reiterate that, but, you know, we're setting a precedence here. And if we do move forward with this, can we say no next time? You know, can we?
Yes.
That's a real question, because if the next developer comes in and says, well, you know, you negotiated with them, and so we could be setting ourselves up a little bit, so we really need to look at that.
The answer is yes, you can say no. That you 100% can say
Yeah, but are they going to
no.
agree with that? I mean, that's the thing is.
I can't predict what council is going to.
I understand that, but we will be setting a precedent here, and so we have to look at that.
You're not setting a precedent.
We will be.
Okay, I don't see any more red lights on, so I think I can say something.
One more. Heather, Mr. Carson said that he has a lot of questions, and we all have some questions. Can those questions be answered next Wednesday?
I hope so, and I'm glad you actually asked that, because I was going to urge you, if you have questions, by all means, send it to us. If there are things that we can prepare in advance of the meeting, I think that can be helpful. If there are things that the developer needs to consider, instead of just springing it on them at the meeting, it's probably helpful. So by all means, if you have questions, send that, and we'll process it from a staff perspective and make sure it's addressed in the public meeting.
And as council, I believe that it's most definitely our responsibility to explore every option whenever an opportunity is presented to council. And it's important for us to make sure that we do our due diligence and then think out the process along with balancing the concerns of the citizens as well as trying to balance the economic development aspect of any particular project. So at this phase of the project, this is very early stages, and I believe that we should have as many meetings as possible and as needed so that we can be as transparent as possible to the community, as well as gather as much data and information from the developers so that we will have the tools and resources available for us to make a decision that's going to be best for our city. So in saying that, next week would be a good idea for us to have a work session. I don't think any of us are going to be under any type of pressure, and I hope none of you are feeling any type of pressure about making a decision next week, because right now we still need to be in that fact-finding mode. We need to get as much data as possible and answer the questions so that when we do make this decision, we're making a decision that's going to be best for the residents of Alamosa.
And to further clarify that, Mayor, it is not a meeting where you will be voting. So it is a work session, and a decision cannot be made. You can provide some direction, but you will not be voting next week.
And then the other thing is, I just want to make sure that we're as transparent as possible and we're following all the rules, guidelines, and processes as we move forward from step to step so that the community feels like they do have a say and their involvement is important. Okay? All right. Next item on the agenda. It's going to be, okay, looks like we're going up back to the top. B1, the first reading of ordinance number 8-2018. It's brought to us by Public Works.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll go ahead and cover this. Mark's been up and down, and this is a pretty straightforward one. This is, as we updated our ordinance for the utility rates, it came to our attention that our 96-gallon container for commercial solid waste was not included on that. When we held the work session, it was, let's go ahead and add that. When we researched it, it turns out that the $25 a month is actually above kind of what the cost is. So staff's recommendation is to keep it at 25 until that escalation catches up to it. But we would still like to include the 25 in the ordinance so it's clear that we can do that charge.
Councilor Vihil.
Are there any questions? Then I move that we approve ordinance number 8-2018 on first reading and set it for a public hearing on March 7, 2017 at 7 p.m. or soon thereafter.
I second that.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Okay, if not, let's start voting. Ms. Holly?
The motion carried unanimously.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is item 1B, public hearing of resolution number 7-2018. You coming? Okay, good.
The city has received a petition from the Chevis family to annex approximately 28 acres of land into the city. And this is a public hearing this evening to consider the eligibility of that property to be annexed in compliance with state law. Unless there's evidence introduced to the contrary, staff is recommending that you consider scheduling a public hearing for the annexation ordinance.
Okay.
Public hearing's actually tonight for the eligibility, so you'll need to hold a public hearing before you act on this resolution. And the issues for eligibility are set forth in the resolution. There has to be a 1/6 contiguity of boundary between the property to be annexed and existing city limits. And Dan, I don't recall what, they have well more than 1/6. I don't recall what that number is. Dan will figure it out. But it's well more than 1/6. And then secondly, a property is not eligible for annexation if two of three conditions are found to exist, and one of them is that 50% or more of the land to be annexed is agricultural, and the owners have expressed that they're going to keep it ag for the next 5 years. That's one. Another is it's not physically practical to extend water and sewer utility services out to that land to be annexed on the same terms and conditions that you provide them to other citizens. So, I mean, you can always do it, but the cost could be so prohibitive that it makes it ineligible for annexation. And then the final one, which wouldn't apply in this instance and in many instances, is that 50% of the residents of the area proposed to be annexed don't take advantage of city amenities like recreation, civic, social, religious, commercial opportunities. This is vacant land, so that one is irrelevant.
Okay, so do we go in?
Did you have the contiguity number there, Dan?
Yes, so minimum 1/6 is required, and this property has 40% of its boundary contiguous with the existing city limits.
Okay, Eric.
And then just procedurally, to be clear, this is merely a hearing on whether the property is eligible for annexation. This is not a consideration of whether you choose to annex it. That's a completely separate issue that will be dealt with at a separate hearing that is separately noticed for a public hearing in, I think it's 45 to 60 days or something like that, but that'll be set by the staff to get that hearing in front of you, where you will actually consider whether you choose to annex it and on what conditions.
So just for clarification purposes, do we have to open up anything for a public hearing right now?
Yes.
Okay, so we would like to open it up for a public hearing. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to come up and express your concerns in regarding to this ordinance? I don't see any, so I will close the public hearing. Council?
I had a question for you, Eric. At what point in the process can we ask questions about the development out there and what we would like to see out there?
That would be at the next scheduled public hearing, where there will be a proposed annexation agreement in front of you that will deal with utilities and paving and streets and sidewalks and water, all other kinds of issues that come into play there. Yeah, appropriate zoning.
Thank you.
There will also be a concurrent request for rezoning at preliminary plat at the same time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, council?
I have a question. Why would we want to annex that small triangular piece of property?
It's a remnant parcel that was left over from the previous annexation, and it provides access into the Chevis Western Rivers property that you leased this evening.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Okay. Councilor Daniel?
I was just going to say, if there were no other questions, that we approve Resolution number 7-2018.
Second.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Do we have any further discussion? If not, council, start voting, please. I think we're missing one. Thank you. Ms. Holly?
The motion carried unanimously.
Thank you very much. The next item on the agenda is falls up under Parks and Recreation. A motion approving the application for the DOLA mini grant for the Family Recreation Center gym lighting LED upgrade.
So Andy's been writing so many other grants. I'm the one that's taken on this one. Every year, we've been fortunate to receive the DOLA mini grant that's handled by SLV DRG. It's ranged from $5,000 to $10,000 each year, and I attached what the requirements are for the grant. Essentially, they don't want it to be just folded into your operations or to purchase rolling stock or different things like that. Historically, what we've applied for is the shelter for the glass crusher in Baylor. We've also applied to use it for the glass crusher itself, First Street design, and then most recently the fairground bucking chutes. As staff looks at the CIP and the priorities that council has set, probably the closest project that's coming up from a priority perspective and is in the right category and the right price tag amount would be the Family Recreation Center gym LED upgrade. It's not necessarily an exciting recreation project, but sometimes those facilities are needed, and it helps in savings and to become more environmentally friendly as well. So that is the recommendation we would have to submit for that proposal.
Thank you. Councilor Rehill.
Heather, thank you for going for this grant, and I'm glad to see us continuing to go environmentally sound with the city. How much would this save us? Do you know by chance?
How much changing the lights would save us?
Yeah, saving money.
I don't have that number in front of me, I'm sorry. We can, okay.
Okay. Any other? Council? Yes, Councilor Rehill.
I move that we authorize the grant submission to SLV DRG for the DOLA mini grant program in the amount of $8,750 for the Family Rec Center LED upgrade.
I second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Okay. Start voting, please. Ms. Holly?
The motion carried unanimously.
Thank you very much. The next item is item 3A, the disposal of the existing fire engine number 1. Hi, Chief.
Hi, Mayor, Council. A little history. Approximately a year ago, Council approved the purchase of a new fire engine to replace our current existing engine 1. Back in '96, the city bought 2 engines at the same time, so our plan is to stagger these out. So our next one will be coming up in about 5-6 years. There was some discussion at that time from Councilor Griego, and I don't know if anybody else mentioned it, about the possibility of donating that to another department within the valley. That is an option for council to decide, or we can actually sell the truck. The market value on it's probably $25,000 to $30,000 based off of the research that we've done. So here looking for input. The $25,000 to $30,000 would be to go into our reserve account, which the city continuously funds, which will help offset the expense of that new truck down the road in 5 to 6 years. A new engine probably at that time, based historically off of how much trucks are going up on an annual basis, is going to run the city probably $530,000 to $550,000. So it's going to be a significant impact on the budget down the road. So our recommendations is to sell it, but I'm here to get council's direction on what your preference is on how we dispose of the apparatus. We're roughly about 30 to 45 days away of receiving the new engine, so we're going to be taking steps to make room for that truck and get the equipment off of the old one.
The other is that Chief has contacted those agencies that normally provide response.
Yeah, our mutual aid
Our mutual
partners.
aid, and they are not in need of the truck. And if it was something that we thought we'd get only $5,000 for, that to us feels like an entirely different consideration. But for $25,000 to $30,000, knowing we have a $500,000 project that's coming up in 5 years is something that felt more significant.
Thank you. Councilor Carson, then Councilor Vigil.
Do you guys already have potential buyers or prospective buyers?
No, we don't, but the used truck market right now is really good, primarily because of the cost of new equipment. There's a lot of smaller departments that are always looking to acquire used trucks. We've tried to take very good care of our equipment, and so I don't think it'll be an issue selling it. We can take that approach first, and then if that doesn't work, then we can go the other route if council decides. But I don't think it'll be an issue selling it based off of some of the market research, and I have talked to a couple of different used truck brokers, and they say it should be an easy sell.
How often do you have to replace them?
They'll run anywhere between 20 and 30 years. This truck will be 21 years old. We are having some things falling apart on it, unfortunately. It's been used a lot more. Engine 2, a few years ago, we actually had to rebuild the motor in it, so that's why we chose to replace Engine 1 first, because Engine 2 has a little bit stronger in terms of the drivetrain is concerned. And so that's, the next replacement is going to put Engine 2 at about 27 years. The trouble you start running into is parts, availability, that kind of thing as you go down the road. But fire trucks are typically a 20-plus year investment. Sure. Fine. Thank you.
Councilor Vigil.
Thank you. Have you done this in the past, selling other engines?
Of course, we sold the old ladder truck to La Hera, and then in 96 or 97, when we took delivery of the 2 engines that we have now, council at that time, we had a 69 truck, and then we had a, early 70s model that the city had bought used out of Poudre Fire Authority in Fort Collins, and they chose to donate those at that point in time, but they were probably trucks that were worth $3,000 to $5,000 at the time.
So historically, we've never donated an engine to a local community?
Other than just those 2 back in 96, 97 that we...
But those were sold?
Those were actually donated. Okay. One ended up going out to Carmel, which is southwest of town, and then the other one went to Saguache.
Okay. But were you saying those were around $3,000 or $5,000?
Yeah, probably market value on those, because the new engines were roughly about $180,000 a piece. The 2 trucks that we got rid of were pretty much had seen their life, and they were probably worth maybe $3,000 to $5,000 on the open market back at that point in time.
Thank you, Chief.
You bet.
Yeah, I can understand the thought process behind possibly donating an engine if it's below, say, under $8,000. But in order for us to be financially responsible, if we have a piece of equipment that can really help reduce the amount of money that's going to be spent on, out of the city's budget, like $35,000, we have to consider utilizing that vehicle as a way to sell it and recoup some of the monies that we need so we can buy that new engine.
Yeah, because you're looking at a lot of money down the road. And
Yes, $550,000.
yeah,
Wow.
and that's just basing off of projections that, if the trend continues, and trucks historically have gone up about 3 to 3.5%, 4% over the last, basically the last 10 years. Cost increases every year, so we know that's going to happen. So that's going to push this next acquisition, into the 550 range.
And by acquiring that new truck for $550, it'll probably give us a lot more opportunities to do other things within the department as far as expansion. Okay, good. All right. Thank you so very much, Chief, Council.
I think it's fine. I think it's fine.
Okay, somebody needs to make a motion.
I'll make a motion. To what? Dispose of existing fire engine number 1.
Okay.
Through selling it, or?
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Okay. All right, Council.
Is that to sell it or to give it away?
To sell it.
Okay, are we clear? All right, start voting, please. All right.
The motion carried unanimously.
Thank you very
Thank
much,
you.
Ms. Holly. Thank you, Chief. The next item is item 4B, a public hearing and a second reading of ordinance number 4-2018, an ordinance approving an intergovernmental agreement with Colorado Department of Human Services, CDHS, the Office of Behavioral Health, and the City of Alamosa for the new law enforcement assistant diversion lead pilot program.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a presentation I know council's heard many times, but this is actually a really exciting program as well. So I do want to take a few minutes, even though it's already been a long night. This is a 3-year contract that the city has been awarded by the state. The city would be eligible up to $575,000 each year. However, since the first year is technically just 3 months, we've only put in for $153,000. The second year we've put in for $560,450, and then the third year $565,703. As we start this program, which is essentially a diversion program for low-level offenses related to drug offenses and prostitution, when we make contact with offenders, we would still write the same report, but instead of sending them into the Justice Center, if they qualify and we put them through an intake and a screening, they would be matched up with a caseworker. And that caseworker would work with the offender to determine what is the root cause of why that person is offending. The amazing part of this grant is that it pays for a program manager, it pays for the caseworkers, and it pays for those wraparound services. So if the reason that the offender is offending is because they are homeless, or because they do not have a job, or medical reasons, or an addiction reason, or mental health, any of those services that are not covered if they're not Medicaid eligible would be covered by this grant as well. It can pay for daycare, it can pay for rental assistance, it can pay for addiction services, it can pay for all of those. Our hope is that we will take these 2 years and 3 months to really get as much out of this as possible and use it as much as possible to determine if this is a different way of approaching some of these offenses. What we're realizing and why it came out of Seattle and other communities are implementing is they're seeing the revolving door, and just incarceration in and of itself isn't always the answer. So we're very, very excited and fortunate to receive this funding to allow us to try something new like this. Additionally, we are excited about the partner
all of the, it's working, and I'll go fast. So we're very excited about the partners. We've had multiple meetings. Holly and Dwayne have been working tirelessly because we are creating this program from the ground up. This does not exist. The forms don't exist. The intake doesn't exist. The flow chart of if someone's in there and reoffends, what do we do? All of that stuff does not exist, and so we are creating this. We're still looking to Seattle, but that's Seattle, which is bigger than Alamosa. So we're not recreating the whole wheel, but we are having to create this from the ground up. The other thing that I want to mention is we need to get the foundation set to where this is working, and then we want to expand it out into the valley. And so we were imagining about halfway through the second year, because remember the first year is just 3 months, halfway maybe into the second year, we will have it running at a good enough rate and feel comfortable enough that we can reach out to other departments to see if we can get these services out into the rest of the valley as well.
Thank you, Heather. Okay, at this time, I will open it up as the public hearing. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to make any comments? Please come up. Thank you for their comment. Really appreciate it. Okay, seeing that there are no other comments, I will close the public hearing and bring it back to council.
Thank you, Mayor.
You're welcome.
Like we said 2 weeks ago, this is a huge, huge deal. I want to thank the councilors who were involved in getting this idea and then throwing it to Heather and Chief for all the hard work you've done on this. And again, we're listening to our constituents. They're saying get something done on this opioid problem. Hopefully this will get it done, or at least help in the process. So again, just kudos to everybody involved.
Thank you. Councilor Carson.
My question is, what do we have to do to move forward with it? We make a motion and move forward. I make a motion that we approve ordinance number 4-2018, an ordinance approving the intergovernmental agreement with Colorado Department of Human Services, the Office of Behavioral Health in the City of Alamosa, for the Law Enforcement Assisted Diversion Pilot Program.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Yeah, I think this is a great program. I'm excited too, so I'll be happy to second it.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Okay, I just have one comment. I believe that in order for this program to be successful, we're going to have to get a lot of the community stakeholders involved. And the good thing that I've seen lately, I've been to at least 3 presentations with Chief Oaks and also Holly. And I've learned so much, it feels like I can give that presentation. And the good thing is that it's going to take the whole community for this program to be successful. People are going to be looking at Alamosa, not only in our state, but throughout the United States. So I'm really excited. I'm excited about the momentum that we are building right now. And I think we're going to do probably have a lot more success with this program in this area because it's pretty much tailored for what we're trying to do throughout our valley. So thank you, everyone. Okay, we have a motion and a second. And we're going to start voting, please. All right, Ms. Hawley?
The motion carried unanimously.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the first reading of ordinance number 5-2018.
Thank you, Mayor. As council is aware, because you voted to take it before the voters, we had the charter requirement that required performance bonds for any city projects in excess of 5,000, which clearly did not make sense for the size and scope of the projects that we do nowadays. That election was successful, and voters agreed to remove that. In regards to moving forward, we still have an ordinance in place that requires a performance bond on projects in excess of 50,000. While that's better, it's still problematic. And so based on the discussion we've had with council, staff's recommendation is that we don't have it be triggered by a number. There are some larger projects, for example, the construction of the Parks building, which was approximately 400,000, that we would have felt comfortable with the other insurance coverages and the experience
experience of some of the other contractors and not need to require that type of bond. However, we could have a different type of project that's more complex and is at that 400,000 level that we would want that bond. So the ordinance that is before you is that it essentially removes the trigger being a number and instead indicates that as we do the capital improvement planning process, we will identify those projects which will require a bond.
Okay, thank you, Heather. Council? Any comments to Heather? Okay.
Well, I think that only makes sense. You know, otherwise contractors add quite a bit on to get a bond and delays the project. So I totally agree on the complexity rather than on dollar amount.
Thank you, Councilor Brawls. Councilor Vigil.
I move that we approve ordinance number 5-2018 on first reading and set it for a public hearing on March 7th, 2018 at 7 p.m. or soon thereafter.
I second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Okay. Start voting, please. Stop like that. Okay, Ms. Holly?
The motion carried unanimously.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the first reading of ordinance number 6-2018.
Thank you, Mayor. As we have a new finance director and we're looking at our processes and how to streamline certain items, one certain situation that can take up some staff time is when we have a licensee who is not either paying or complying with some of the licensee requirements. The code currently provides a process that if we wanted to revoke that retail license, what that process would be, and we don't have any issues. One of the items we ran into, though, is as they look to renew, if they still owe fees to the city or have not caught up their previous submissions for their retail license, it's not very clear cut that we can withhold renewal of that license. The language wasn't clear, and in fact, it was kind of funky saying that we needed to go through the revoking process, but they don't have a license to revoke. So what we wanted to do was provide some language that allows the finance director to refuse a renewal of a retail license and to add that if the applicant is in default of any indebtedness or any other obligation due to the city. We also have items 1 through 6 that if the license was obtained by fraud, misrepresentation, or false statements, the license activity is a public nuisance as defined by ordinance or statute. The license was issued in error upon grounds provided by any other city application, requirement, ordinance, state statute, federal law, or regulation. That's almost like the little wording at the end of the commercial. And then the proposed use of any premise for which a license is sought is not authorized by the Unified Development Code, building, housing, or other regulations. It's important to know that the licensee would still have an appeal process. So if the finance director does not renew it, they can appeal the decision to the city manager. If they do not agree with what my decision is, they are afforded the possibility of judicial review.
Thank you, Heather. Council, any comments, question? Okay. Councilor Daniel.
Thank you. I just have one note, just a notice. The subject and title is reading of ordinance number 6-2018, and the issue before council, it says number 8. It's just a typo. And I know these just keep coming back through us, and so if we can, so at the top, it's number 6, and then right above the alternatives, it says ordinance number 8. If we can just fix that for the next reading.
Thank you.
Thank you for noticing that, Councilor Daniel. Okay, Councilor Vigil.
I move that we approve ordinance number 6-2018 on first reading and set for a public hearing on March 7th or soon thereafter.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Okay, please start voting. You just hit stop. Oops. Sorry about that. Okay, let's start voting again. All righty. Okay,
The motion carried unanimously.
thank you very much. The next item on the agenda is 4E, the first reading of ordinance number 7-2018.
Thank you, Mayor. This ordinance came about because the bowling alley needed to get a new liquor license. Its license had expired while they had a transfer in ownership and could not be renewed, so therefore needed a new one. When we looked at the distance restrictions, they are too close to Ortega Middle School. The way that the statute considers distance restrictions is you measure from the building where alcohol is licensed to the nearest property line of the property on which the school is located. That property line happens to be all the way down at the admin building. It's just one big tract. So it's too close. The council had, long before you guys, tried to address that by saying, oh, well, we're exempting the admin building, but that didn't do it effectively. So the old license probably shouldn't have been issued the way it was. This ordinance tries to clean that up, and in thinking about that, it didn't make sense to staff to have a 500-foot restriction from schools with respect to hotel and restaurant liquor licenses. The statute governing liquor license issuance has a default setting of a minimum 500-foot distance from various things for all liquor licenses, but the statute from schools, I should say. The statute does allow you to exempt certain types of licenses from that restriction or certain types of schools from that restriction, and also allows you to modify the 500 feet. So you can change it to 400, you can change it to 900, you can do whatever you want with that. Staff's proposal is that, well, looking at the fact that you have, or council has in the past, taken a number of actions to exempt very specific kinds of schools from those distance restrictions, didn't make a whole lot of sense. It made more sense to just eliminate the restriction on hotel and restaurant licenses. These are where alcohol is served with meals in hotels and restaurants. And I ran this by Rob Alejo with the school district and did not get any negative comment. He said they'd never had any issues with respect to the nearness between the bowling alley and Ortega Middle School. So that's where it sits for your consideration.
And to be clear on the liquor license, Eric, correct me if I'm wrong, so this is not a bar, a standalone bar, it's not a liquor store, it is only for those areas that is a restaurant and there's food being sold and those types of things. So that's why we're comfortable with this recommendation. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, council. Councilor Daniel.
Thank you.
Then Councilor Broyles.
So, I think this makes me feel old. I'm not one to usually say we've always done it this way, so we need to continue to do it this way. But I think there is some safety for people when they say, I know I can't have liquor within 500 feet of my school. Like, there's a feeling of our parents and things like that. I don't, I know we've exempted it because it was the college and some other things that have happened in there. So I'm just kind of processing a little bit out loud. But I had a gut visceral reaction to removing it completely from no restriction around schools. In my prevention mind and those kinds of things, I'm not sure this makes the most sense from a message that we're sending. Not that it's a bad ordinance, but the message that the ordinance sends itself. And so I would be more comfortable with lowering it to 400 feet in our community versus taking it all away. That would be my thought on this.
Councilor Hensley.
So I guess my question would be, and I'm just asking, so if it went to 400 feet, that would kind of do the same thing? If 400 feet is that distance, then anybody could still do it?
So the person in question now could do it. Like, we can still exempt OMS, like that place had a liquor license before and it maybe shouldn't have had, like what Eric said. I just feel like I feel like removing it completely from schools sends a message. And so I want us to be thoughtful about that message versus whether or not it's a reasonable thing. I'm just saying, it might not be reasonable. My logic might not be reasonable.
So then my question is, so I'm assuming the 400 feet works for the bowling alley?
The bowling alley is 417 feet from OMS property, so yes, 400 would work.
So then my question is, if ever in the future, there's another restaurant or bar, or not bar, but another restaurant, and we want to go back to this, we could always go back to this and change it if we felt at a future date.
Yes, it's an ordinance, so
So-
you can change the ordinance.
I don't know if you noticed, I put up on the screen we had, again, Deacon draw. Deacon is very useful because I'm such a map visual kind of guy. I had him locate where the schools in Alamosa are and what a 500-foot radius around each of those schools would be. Now, bear in mind, that's just a very rough approximation because the distance goes in a pedestrian walking path from the liquor building to the school lot boundary. So this is in no way meant to mean this is where those distance restrictions are, but it's a rough approximation of where they would be and where your schools are. And one of the things that I noticed there is really the only place that's anywhere near a school that you would think might be subject to a hotel or restaurant license going in would be something down around the Goal Academy, obviously Ortega, and potentially Ombudsman, I would think. But you guys know your community and may have different thoughts about that.
Okay, Councilor
Question,
Grohl.
how long has that bowling alley had the liquor license?
Holly, do you know? I don't, it's been at least 20 years.
I mean, would it make more sense, since it's right or wrong, we approved it, our city council approved it, to have just that bowling alley grandfathered in, but keep the 500 feet distance?
You can't do that. So it shouldn't have been issued that way in the first place. And when I say you can't do that, you can't exempt certain schools. You can exempt types of schools. So you could exempt colleges, you could exempt junior colleges, you could exempt trade schools, but you can't exempt a particular school building. You can't exempt Ortega Middle School.
Yeah, I wasn't meaning to exempt them. I just grandfathered the liquor license because of the 417 feet, just that one establishment.
You could have renewed it or reissued it and done it grandfathering that way, but they have passed the deadlines for doing that, so they have to have a new license.
Councilor Hensley.
So I guess my question, I guess I want to verify, whenever there's a new liquor license, we approve it, correct? They go through that process where they come in front of us. So part of me, I guess I'm torn either way. I mean, I guess it's not a huge deal for me either way. I do think the bowling alley should have their chance to get their liquor license. So my question is, are we just doing 400 feet to allow this? If we could always say yes or no to a liquor license, is this as important? Because we could always say, we don't think that one is a good one to have around a certain school.
So I think that's reasonable. I just know I have heard parents and schools have a comfort in saying, I know an establishment can't be within 500 feet of my school. Like, it's, again, I'm not saying that it's a logical thing, it's a feeling in my heart thing that I feel like it sends a message to families that if we eliminate that restriction, it says we don't care. And I know that's emotional and not logical.
So I'm fine with the 400 feet if that's how it feels. Honestly, for me, that's fine.
Two things I want to make clear. One is we're only talking hotel restaurant licenses, so this isn't any liquor license. And the second is, no, Councilor Hensley, we cannot deny a liquor license just because we happen to think that's a bad place to put it. We can deny a liquor license because we don't think that the applicant has satisfied their burden on the needs and the desires of the neighborhood or such, but we can't just say we don't like that place.
And the only other consideration I will offer is that if there is a vacant building and a restaurant was potentially looking to go in there, if they were to do their research, and not every developer does, but if they were to do their research and say, oops, we're within the 400 feet, they probably would maybe not even get into the process to request a license and would look at another location. When you look at these circles, you may not be getting that many triggers, but that is the only implication I can think of just doing 400 versus not having anything for this type of thing.
Okay, counsel. Counselor Daniel has made a recommendation to alter the motion. So what would you all like?
So I mean, and then we can change it if people don't want it, but I move that we approve ordinance 728, changing it though to 400 feet, reduce the distance restriction to 400 feet rather than 500 feet.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion?
Just to clarify, Counselor Daniel, is that with respect to hotel and restaurant licenses or to all liquor licenses?
Just hotel and restaurant licenses, please, and then to set it for public hearing, because I forgot that part too.
Okay, start voting, please.
The motion carried unanimously.
No, thank you for sharing your concerns. It's always important. That's why we're all up here, so we can hear different perspectives. So thank you. All right, next item. Item 4F, CML Municipal Hero Nomination.
Thank you, Mayor. We are almost to the end of the agenda. This would be the third year that the city would look at making a nomination for the Colorado Municipal League's Municipal Hero Award. This is a great opportunity to recognize those individuals in our community that are going above and beyond and just working to make our community better. The first year, we were really excited because our nominee of Matt Abbey was selected. His nomination was based for his work on the Boy Scouts and creating the local rocketing club. The second year, we nominated the Honeycuts because for their amazing Alamosa Roundup and the Alamosa Christmas Parade of Lights. While they weren't selected, they still do recognize those community nominations. This year, council's indicated that they may want to have a discussion on who the nominations are going to be. We did get some names in advance. You by no means need to stick to these names, but these were the names that were submitted in advance. And those are Ruthie Brown, Mick Daniel, Julie Mordecai, Rob Pickett, and Luke Yoder.
Counselor Carson.
When are we expected to make this nomination?
We need to know tonight so we can write up the nomination and submit it to CML.
I nominate Ruthie Brown.
Okay. Let's have a little discussion about this, and then we'll talk about nomination. Is that okay? That way we can be fair to everybody. So let's go, Councilor Hensley.
So,
Okay, is that good?
So I think all of these are really good nominations, and they've all done a lot. I did not send one in, and I'd like to throw one in there. I think Dwayne Oakes is one that I really feel should be nominated. He has done so much for our community, and I may not be saying the right words, but from having the dogs with the 2 dogs that we have, the lead grant without a doubt, having the ticketless tickets, or paperless tickets. I feel in the last few years, just the culture of our police department has really, not that it was bad, but it just has a really good image. There's a lot of things that are going on. When Matt Abbey got it, so he was outside of our city, I just really feel that Dwayne has done way more than he needed to or has to, and it shows his loyalty to our community. So I'd like to throw his name in the hat.
His name wasn't on the list. That's not.
And can it be a city employee? Are we okay with that?
Yes, it can.
Okay.
Did you say his name was on the list?
No, I said his name wasn't on the list. That's not fair. I was just looking at
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Councilor Vijo.
I nominated Ruthie and Julie Mordecai in emails back to Heather and Holly, I believe. The reason I nominated Julie was because of all of her work with the Rio Grande revitalization, all of her work towards outdoor opportunities for our constituents, securing and improving and really getting going that farm park, even though some of us, or not some of us, but when it first came out, there was a lot of people who were against it. It's really turning around there. It's becoming a place for local folks to farm. If they don't have land, if they don't have anything to, if they don't have a space to farm, they can go out there and do that. And we might not know it, but it's coming, is becoming a piece of tourism for our city. And that will be expanded this next summer, and as that space gets better. And I also nominated Ruthie Brown first because I feel like she just does so much for our community. I know, and if she was here, I think she'd smile if I said this, I know that she does bring up a lot of issues for us, but I think that makes us better. Her work with all of these sick kids in our community who are going to die soon, and having them have fundraisers and having days for them, and I think it's just awesome. She has a group in the summertime of mentally handicapped individuals who go around and clean up our city. So I just think she's awesome at what she does. But you throwing in Chief Oaks is also a heavy hitter as well. So those are my thoughts.
And I...
Councilor Daniel.
Oh, sorry, Mayor, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm sleepy. I apologize for that. I nominated Luke and Rob and maybe Mick as well. I can't remember completely. Okay. I got a little excited. And so, but I think Rob really came to the top of my mind for all of the work that he did, helping us with the multi-purpose facility and how he supports the youth hockey. And I really, when I was thinking about like impact for even just a small group of kids, but a pretty significant impact, he came to mind. Luke and Mick both actually were very much broader impacts that they have. Luke with his Center for Restorative Programs going to work as a partner in the LEAD grant, in addition to all of the diversion programs that he has helped coordinate with the city, and all of the work he actually does throughout the valley, but really the restorative justice work he does here helps people find peace with their perpetrators, and that to me says something that's really special. And then Mick has come back to our community and has just been a rock star. I mean, all of the things he's doing with SLV Go, all of the things that he is becoming involved in, ensuring that the city knows about, I think those are important. And I do have to say, I do agree that Ruthie brings a ton to our community, and she does a lot of support. I also feel she doesn't stick up for us either. So she brings a lot of negative things, which are important and we need to know, and I think we learn from them 100%, and I appreciate that about her. I don't always feel that it is nice, I guess, is the best way to say that. And so I've had a lot of talk about being nice today, and so that's where I'm at.
Councilor Carson.
The reason I had nominated Ruthie or thought about nominating Ruthie was the same thing. She's very active, she's here, she's very vocal, and like it or not, sometimes, that's important. We don't always want to hear nice because that doesn't always make for a good machine. Sometimes you really need to hear the stuff that you don't want to hear. But with the addition of Dwayne Oaks, that's an important thing, because they're right, the police department has a really good stance in our community. We see a lot of the issues around the country with people haggling with police constantly, and we don't have that culture here. And I think it's because of that, because of the leadership and the people that he's chose to put under him. So I think good luck with that. You guys have a hard job, but yeah, those are very good nominations. I would push for Ruthie or Dwayne, and leave that up to you guys to figure that out.
Well, Councilor Hensley, we're going to do it. We're going to figure it out.
So I guess, and without a doubt, oh my gosh, all 5 of these are awesome. And so I saw each one, I'm like, oh my gosh, this would be great, this would be great, this would be great. And I think one of the things with Chief Oaks, I guess I want to add, is with the LEAD grant. This is something as City Council, when we went to that meeting at CML, and we saw that LEAD grant and how excited we were. If we didn't have Chief Oak's support, he had to talk to a lot of people and get a lot of people on board, and all staff did. But I do think that's what puts it over the edge. I mean, there's all sorts of great stuff, but this LEAD grant, we've just started, and it's going to continue on, and we had to have that support, or this wouldn't have gone anywhere. And the amount that he put into putting that grant together, again, not diminishing anything else that any of you did, but I just think putting all of it together is hence why I guess I push. But honestly, these are all great too. And maybe that's part of it, is one's internal and 5 are external. How do you pick out a 5 external when you got 1 internal, so you can kind of, but that's my reasoning.
Councilor Brawls.
But when I saw this, I thought of Ruth Brown, even though she's given me problems over the years. Her heart's in the city, and she's always working hard primarily for the low to moderate income people. And I really appreciate that. And I think she's done this for 20, 30 years, and she has a long time track record. So I thought she'd be great. And of course, Chief Oakes is great too. I would endorse those two.
So I just want to be clear that I don't not like the feedback that we get. I just sometimes feel like you can give feedback and still be nice. And I think that's just an important distinction I want to make. Not that I only need to hear nice things, but that feedback can come directly and professionally and appropriately, and sometimes I don't feel like that comes across. But I am in support of Chief Oakes, and so I don't know if there's, are you going to have a discussion?
I was going to say a few words, if that's okay. I'll use the basketball analogy of a dream team. If we were to construct a municipal hero dream team, this group right here with these people would be ideal for what happens and the things that they do throughout our community. And I have to add that Chief Oakes would be the point guard. Because not only, I know we hear a lot about what he does in the community when it comes to the LEAD programs, and also the way he keeps the morale up with the officers, and also the work that he does in Trinidad, also the collaboration that he has with all of the officers in the San Luis Valley. I've seen this man go into an elementary school and keep 5-year-olds as calm as I don't know what. And he reads to them, and they all come around him like he's this hero, in which he is a hero in the community. So I have to say, by adding Chief Oakes to the equation, in my eyes, he would be the one that I would vote for. So at this time, we're going to have to vote. We'll have to make the decision. So how do you want us to do this, Eric?
Someone can just make a nomination and a second and a vote, and you see where it goes from there.
Okay.
Go ahead. I nominate Chief Oakes.
I second that.
Okay. We have a motion and a second to nominate Chief Oakes for the Colorado Municipal League's Hero Award. Do we have any further discussion? Okay. And just going to add one little note. Chief is also a part of the Alamosa Literacy Council, and that's the program where he goes into the schools and reads to the kids.
Can I add something?
Okay. Yes, go ahead, Councilor.
So one thing, I don't know if we can do this or not. This would be obviously starting something new. Since this is the first time it's come to us, I'd still like to honor these other 5, since you talked about a dream team. Mm-hmm. So I don't know how, but I'd like to maybe at a city council meeting, somehow.
An Alamosa hero.
Yeah, Alamosa, something like that, because I do feel I really like your analogy of a dream team, that this is a team, because we are a team. Nobody can do this by themselves. So I'd like to see if there's some way we could honor all of them, and then obviously.
We could prepare a proclamation that just recognizes their contributions and their nomination.
I think that would be really nice.
I think that would be really nice. Very, very good. Okay, we have a motion. Second. Start voting, council. Ms. Holly?
The motion carried unanimously.
Okay, thank you so very much. Okay, that brings us to the last item on the agenda. The selection of pieces for the second annual Artscape Art on Loan program.
Thank you, Mayor. So we saved the funnest one for the last. Staff recommends that City Council approve the selection of 20 art pieces for the second annual Artscape. We kicked the program off in 2017 with the selection of 17 art pieces. We drew a lot of positive comments. I especially enjoyed driving and seeing people taking selfies with the artwork and seeing the excitement. We've also received $1,150 in donations. And I want to make sure I'm clear that this would not have been possible without the expertise and volunteerism on the art committee and all the hard work by Jolene. This year, we received 58 submissions. We used the same selection process that we used last year, which included the first review by the art committee. What they did was to make sure that there wasn't a piece that was dangerous or made of some type of material that could not withstand the elements. Then next, it was sent to a community art jury, and they would rank all of the pieces on a scale of 1 to 7. The jury is comprised of representatives from the Senior Center, veterans, Alamosa High School art student, ASU art student, Chamber, Downtown Business, Art Alliance, Boys and Girls Club, TSJC art student, and ALMA. So we really wanted to get some diversity on that art jury. They have provided a ranking, and I am going to show you the top 20. While I'm asking you to approve those top 20, we will actually only be doing 15 pieces. The reason we want to select 20, though, is sometimes before we're able to get the contract in place, they get a piece that's sold or something might change. And so we always want to have a backup so we can have pieces to fit into those slots. The new artwork will be installed September 7th, 2018. We decided to move the date for the art installation. You guys are peeking at the artwork already, I can tell. We decided to move the art installation date from June because we felt it was competing with some of the other special events that were occurring in the community. We also wanted to keep it paired with the downtown art walk, and they felt that September presented a better time for them to get people to come and walk and do those things. Additionally, we will be adding the Chaka Walk, which was a separate function, and it was previously in September on a different weekend, but they will be moving it. So we're turning it into much more of an art weekend. The other thing we're excited about from the Chaka Walk is that actually pulls a lot of youth and a lot of different type of excitement that maybe the downtown art walk doesn't pull. So we're excited to be getting more ages involved in the artwork. We also, as you know, have purchased El Pastor. So in addition to the 15, we are going to have El Pastor. The art committee has selected in front of the depot as the official home. So when we're moving the pieces, it will be moved to in front of the depot on that pedestal. Additionally, we were trying to think outside the box on, maybe some of these artists don't have a place to take their artwork, and instead of putting it back in their place, they'd like to keep it displayed here in Alamosa. So we did ask some of them, and we actually have 2 who are willing to do that. So if they sell it, of course, they're going to come and pick it up. But until that happens, we can continue to display that artwork. And so they still get a little promotion, and that helps them, but it also creates more energy in our environment. So we're excited about that. Finally, before we get to the pictures, the committee's also been trying to work on making this sustainable. We want to make sure that we are not just taking what's in the budget, but are there ways we can raise funds and look at ways to make this more sustainable, similar to what other communities have done. So following the selection of art, and once we get the contract signed, we will be sending a letter out to businesses highlighting that we have 2 sponsorship levels. One's a visionary sponsor, which is at the $2,000 level. This would allow them to not only pick their piece from the selected 15, but they can decide where they want to place it downtown as well. The creative sponsor is at a $750 level sponsorship, and they can still pick their piece, but they can't decide where they're going to put it. Both of those receive all the marketing in regards to a plaque. It'll be in the brochure, all of those types of things. And so there's a lot of benefits that will come with that. And so with that, I will open up the presentation. and we can review the artwork.
So are we going to vote on 15 pieces tonight by looking at these 20?
My recommendation is after I show this to you, that someone makes a motion to approve all 20 pieces.
Oh, okay, good.
That's simple.
Okay.
This is from Kasha. She is the one that has the Russian doll right now. So this would be glass, and this is her working on the actual piece. This person is from Santa Fe, New Mexico. It's Wings of Freedom. This is from Monument, Colorado, Lighthearted Drummer. This is actually glass that is in there. This is Old Goat, which I believe is Amayas, our young artist locally, or San Luis. This is Barley Dance from Loveland, Colorado. It's carved limestone. This is cello from Columbus, Ohio. We have a musical theme, you will see. This is acoustic guitar from Lawton, Oklahoma. Thought of a Treble Clef from Henderson, Nevada. Sandhill Cranes, so this is actually 3 that would be put up together from Castle Rock, Colorado. Deciduous, thank you, Eric, from Alamosa, Colorado. This is Kyle's. He's also on the art committee. Low Poly Open Heart from Washington, D.C. This is a return artist from Mountain Spell, Evergreen, Colorado. The Deluxe Spray It Fire Rocket Ship from Salida. This is called Tower from New Mexico. So this is all 3 of them, Cultural Pedestrians from Boulder, Colorado. This is Humanity, Grand Junction, Colorado. Those are faces. And this is Polar Bears. This is from Huberto, San Luis, Colorado. Is it Zia? Zia. And I believe this is an ASU student, Alamosa. 3 Golden Flowers, Pine, Colorado. Descending Angel, Cedar Edge, Colorado. So those are the top 20.
Wow. Thank you so very much, Heather, for that display of art. Councilor Hensley.
Which are the 2 that we get to keep, or are going to let us keep them for another year? Never mind, it's okay.
Yeah, I think I know, but I'm not 100% sure, so let me check with Jolene and I can let you know. Okay.
Councilor Vigil and then Councilor Daniel.
I was going to make a motion.
That's good.
I move that we approve the selection of these 20 art pieces for the second annual Art Spake program.
I second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussions? I would just like to make a comment to Heather, to the team that's working on this artwork. Would you please let them know we greatly appreciate it, because this goes a long ways in making our city look beautiful for people who come to our town. So thank you all so much. Great selections. All right, start voting, everybody. Ms. Holly?
The motion carried unanimously.
Thank you. Okay, I believe that is, no, it's not. Okay. Okay. The next item is committee reports. Do we have any committee reports? Nope. Okay. Staff announcements.
Okay, I'm going to try to make this fast. I know we're tired. Today, we closed on our contract for water rights for 250 acre-feet of historical pumping from Cole Hatchard for approximately $400,000. So that has closed, and we've got that locked up. We're going to start bugging Eric on what he's going to do to start putting that augmentation plan together. And we have a few more pieces, but from a historical pumping, we're looking really good at getting those pieces. So that was very positive for today. I wanted to let council know, especially some of you, as we've had our conversations with the golf board, there's been some questions in regards to looking at partnering with them and having our finance department handle their accounting and financial side of things. They have signed an agreement with Wall Smith and Bateman to take them to May 31st, so not the entire year, it's a partial year. And John and Judy have already been meeting to take a look at what that would look like in order to try to help them not have to spend those funds, and they can put those towards capital projects. And so it looks very, very positive. We're not quite sure on payroll, but we are investigating that, and things seem to be moving very smoothly. And we're just appreciative of the golf board being open to that and making sure they're using their funds efficiently. And then finally, I just want to give a shout out to Andy. If he looks a little tired, he's been writing grants left and right. They've done 2 different tree grants. They've done a recycling grant for some of our special events. He's written 2 grants for Kaboom for 2 different playgrounds, the GOCO grant and the Colorado Health Foundation grant. So kudos to Andy. It takes a lot of work, and he does a really good job, and so I'm excited that he's done that, and hopefully we'll be bringing some resources to the community. And with that, Eric, I think you just have a quick mention on the opioid.
Yes, just to update you on some of what's going on with respect to the opioid litigation that's been going on around the nation. There is a bunch of activity that's starting to take place in Colorado, and I have been meeting with some of the Front Range cities who have been sort of spearheading the question of whether it makes sense to try to join forces in opioid litigation or to evaluate joining the multi-district litigation that's going on in federal court, or to just punt the question entirely. So we've actually been talking to some of the nationwide leading law firms who are dealing with opioid litigation, and by that I mean this is litigation that seeks to hold manufacturers, distributors, and even pharmacies in some cases responsible for creation of the opioid epidemic, and to seek to obtain ways to address the problems that we as states, counties, and municipalities have been left with. So we've been talking to some of the leading nationwide legal firms about that. We just had a meeting. There was a meeting yesterday, I think it was yesterday, between a number of the counties in Colorado and cities in Colorado to talk about joint efforts and trying to put something together that doesn't step on each other's toes. One of the obviously main questions is, does Alamosa want to participate at all in some kind of opioid litigation? And if so, how does that look? And so once we've got a couple more of these broad-based meetings scheduled, and once there's some kind of consensus on a way that the group may be moving forward, I will bring that to you for your consideration on what Alamosa might want to do, if anything, with respect to that opioid litigation. The only litigation that's been filed in Colorado that I'm aware of is Huerfano County filed a lawsuit against a number of manufacturers and distributors.
Thank you, Eric, and thank you, Heather. Okay. Next is council comments. Do we have any? Councilor Daniel?
I just have a couple. It feels like a lot has happened in the last week. I wanted to say I'm super excited for adult volleyball to start, so thank you, Andy. Aside from writing all those grants, you're getting our next season up and going. The Boys and Girls Club Youth of the Year was last week, and I was not able to attend, but I heard it was wonderful. Today, I attended the Supporting Outcomes and Advocacy for Recovery and actually got to present at that at Adams State today, and it was wonderful, and I think everyone is probably aware of the transition in leadership that has happened at Adams State, and Dr. Nearing spoke to our community today and said how committed he and the administration were to moving us forward and getting us through this transition time, and it was a very positive approach to what I think is spiraling negatively, sadly, in some social media aspects. And so I felt very comfortable with his words, and I felt like he was doing very well. And then this weekend, Tucasa is having their, and there were over 400 people at the SOAR Symposium today, which was just amazing, amazing. And then Tucasa is having their fundraiser gala this Saturday, and it's the, subject is, or the theme is what is love, and I'm very much looking forward to going to that, so thanks.
Thank you so much, Councilor Daniel. Councilor Hensley.
Well, Heather and I were able to go to the Boys and Girls Club, so we had a really good time. It was awesome. So we really enjoyed it. And we did today also have the SLV Tourism Conference at Adams State, and our mayor was our keynote speaker, and he did a fantastic job. So thank you again for doing that.
You're welcome.
It was a really good conference, so just wanted to talk about those couple things.
Thank you. And Councilor Hensley, I would like to thank you and all the participants from the San Luis Valley Tourism Association, because the energy I got from the people in that meeting was very positive. It seems like we can find some common ground to promote the San Luis Valley as a whole, as a team, and that way the whole San Luis Valley will benefit. And I just have one final comment. And my comment tonight is going to go to my city council team right here. You all did an awesome job of doing your homework, and I really appreciate that. With the tough questions that you brought up tonight, shows that you are listening to the citizens, and you're doing your due diligence, and you're doing everything that you need to do in order to make sure that you're equipped to make decisions as we move forward with the process. But I was really impressed with the quality of questions that you all generated tonight. Thank you so much. Okay, you're welcome. Are there any other further comments? Okay, meeting adjourned.